The revenge of By the Numbers is brought to you by eSportsBet, the industry's leading crypto odds matrix. Of course, there is no CSGO running right now because we're in the player break until the 14th of August, but there is still plenty of esports you can bet on. They have League of Legends, Valorant, Babby's CSGO. They obviously have Overwatch, Rainbow Six, FIFA, Dota 2, all the esports games you can imagine, basically. If you've never deposited, then with the link in the description box below, you can get a 50% deposit bonus on up to $200. If you enjoy betting on esports, or if you just would like to try, I'd recommend checking out eSportsBet.
Chris is still in the picture. Oh, I'm still very much in the round. Oh, Chris, he's found three. It's down to a 2-on-2. Chris, can he close this with an ace? Oh my God!
He gives him a chance at least, and this CZ kill could be everything. Finally, Zeus, he does something!
Looking for a second, he connects it. Oh, and he gets a third as well. Surely he's not going to pull this off. Oh, Caldera, the man, the myth, the beast.
Zaiwu, no help really, but he's still hitting shots. He's already got 3. And 5. And oh my God, Zaiwu! Unbelievable!
All right. So this is very weird because it is not Pop Flash. In fact, no, it is By the Numbers, or Return of By the Numbers, Revenge by the Numbers,
yes.
As we keep going through the iterations of the show. And
it's actually gotten more brutal if you think about it, because here's what you don't know, which is the reason why Richard went to that naming scheme. So original one was By the Numbers, then obviously the show returned, thanks to the patrons, it was returned By the Numbers. Then the reason he actually picked as the third one, Revenge, is because his angle is he's a big fan of like classic 80s Hollywood horror movies, right? And you know, that's sort of like the way you'd name them. Well, the reason why it ended up being extra fitting, though, this is why you've always got to be very careful how you name things, because names have a power in the universe. Well, here's the problem, Semler. Much like a classic series where the third one doesn't contain one of the well-loved actors, it just contains some other jobber from the industry that was free to just fill in the role, you know, and just wanted to get some shine off the franchise. So, you know, just I'm not saying anything about anyone in particular.
No, of course not.
That's the way the industry works. You know, we are Hollywood now, boys. We're Hollywood.
We're all the way in on
exactly.
this one.
Because you know, in Hollywood, when they would do that, when they just make like a third movie and they'll have the same characters and they'll just be like a totally new actor. And you're like, what? Where's the original guy? And they're just playing it off like, what do you mean? Hey, Billy, how are you doing? Like, what is this? That's a different. I mean, sadly, I can't think of any modern day examples. Tamazuba, like I was going to say, like a boomer. It was like I think like Married in Children or some show like that did that years back. But that's a terrible reference to give someone because it's from the 1980s or something like.
Dude, nobody's.
I know.
That one.
I know that's a terrible reference. That's almost as bad. You have to understand this show particularly is legendary for me, giving the most boomer examples ever. like there was an episode. This wasn't even that long ago. So it was like 2 years ago. On the one where like ESL sent that like fucking Monopoly set to me as like a joke or whatever, you know, like trying to needle me by sending me a Monopoly set of ESL. Right? I make a joke.
I got the same one.
Well, the problem is, I made a joke
Uli shot me a
when I was like,
hey.
I was like €50. Isn't that how much? Like, I actually said how much an N64 game costs. The M64 came out, I think, in 1996. Like, so all you need to know is I even did, just because fuck it, have Sam like edit into the actual VOD. Like when I say N64, they've cut it out and he just goes switch or something like that. I actually got them to edit that in because it was just such an embarrassing like reference because I was like 30 years off on that one. Like,
dude, why is that in a bet? N64 is the GOAT
system. Oh, it was a classic console.
It's the best system. Yeah. There was that going back a while ago, actually. Oh, I got a dog on the loose.
It's all right.
There was going around for a while where like they had like the head-to-head, you know, which was the system that won, you know, N64.
Oh, really?
Okay. Or like, you know, GameCube and
and
shit like that. You know, and so you were going like back and forth between the two. And that's, you know, N64 wins 100% of the time. I mean, it had all of the classics on it.
Oh, it did, yeah. That was actually one of those examples, by the way, of where, like, as you say, like mainstream culture got it wrong. What happened was, if people don't know, I'll give you a very brief history lesson here. The reason why the PlayStation is considered to be the one that won is because it just sold more. And it had more of like, it was the more popular console. Like,
it was
basically
like a continental thing as well.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. When I was a kid, here's the reason PlayStation was popular. It's because it was actually the one that broke through to like the lads, as it were. It wasn't nerds anymore. It was all the dickheads who wanted to play FIFA and Tomb Raider and racing 16 games. Whereas that's the reason why, for like, in my opinion, the hardcore gamers, the N64 was the shit though. Because not only was the tech better, like, except for it didn't have CDs, but the better part was it had all those classic games. Like, it had all the groundbreaking, like Zelda, like fucking Mario. Like, here's the thing: Crash Bandicoot's fun. It ain't fucking Mario 64. Let's just sit in the foot. Whoa, you better chill out. I'm back on
That's
that.
when you're getting into the,
you know what I mean?
and the Marios and all
Come
that.
on.
I mean, that had like the first Super Smash, Smash Bros.
And all the
like,
shit, yeah.
Dude, that's when like there was that unhealthy. We had the idea back then. We were like kids back then too, but we already had the idea of gambling back then because we'd basically put 4 bots in,
yes,
and just like try and place bets. You know, and we don't have any money, so I don't even remember what the fuck we were betting, but like just trying to place bets on like who's gonna win out of 4 bots and shit like that. You know, just to kill time. They even had it back then, guys. We were very innovative back in the day. But
also there was that classic game Mario Party where a bunch of different people, friends, just teammates, try to get along and battle in a bunch of different mini games. And as each round goes along, you remove people from the game. So kind of like being in G2. So
there you go.
Sadly, you can already see I was working on something when I began that. I made it last too long. I made it last too long. It's like the shit-eating grin started to come out. It was over already. I've got to keep a better poker face in that sense. I've got to keep a better poker face.
Yeah, I know. Well, if you haven't caught on yet, guys, this is the 2nd episode now, and Richard is not on the show.
He's never going to be. Spoiler. If you're waiting for it, like if you're hoping,
you're waiting for Richard to like pop out.
Exactly. You have to understand that
nowhere.
He's now entered the status like your dad who left when you were 4 years old for cigarettes. Like he's never coming back, and he's not coming back with a giant bag of cigarettes. So don't worry about that one. Richard's gone. Listen, it was great, good times and all that. We'll remember him fondly, but he ain't coming back to the show. So forget about that, guys.
Well, dude, that's the thing. Like, it is what it is. He's still cranking out articles. We talked about one last time around, and he's still actually there. You know,
in that sense, he'll impact the show. Yeah, I'm sure he'll do some things in the future we'll talk about, no doubt.
Exactly. That's the thing. We're still keeping tabs. Absolutely. But like right now, it's kind of this has just been a week that's kind of just been absorbed by Cologne. There hasn't been really any getting around it. It's just been insane. Like all matches have been pretty fire. An upset.
Dude, you know what? Obviously, this is a conversation that's had many times, but obviously, this used to be a major if you go back to 2016.
Basically, yeah.
The joke is, if people don't get the way the industry works now, that's how you know ESL is the TO that succeeds the best, because they actually actively choose not to have Katowice and Cologne as majors anymore because they don't need them to be. Like, realistically, if you look at both of those events this year, the Katowice event and the Cologne event, they felt like they were majors. It was the same sort of vibe as the major, especially now they do the playing thing. It's like, it even has the same vibe of like you ramp up over 3 weeks, then you go to the finals. Like, I actually listen, you can dislike ESL's orders and plenty of the shit they say and do and how they market things, but they kill it with the fucking tournaments, man. They do very good. I thought this Cologne week was baller. I was loving it.
That's exactly it. Like his build, like Katowice was ramping up because again, it was like getting back into arenas for the first time after Rona. So they had that really going for him. And here Cologne, it was the same kind of thing. I don't think they sold as many tickets. That was like one thing that I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, exactly. Because they used to brag always about being sold out. Yes.
It's sold out.
Yes.
That could mean anything. They could sell 10 tickets. They could sell 10,000, 100,000. You don't know if
they used to say the number though, Sam. I know when it was like 15 or 16K.
Exactly.
They
used to say the number. And when they didn't say the number, I'm like,
that's what you know. Exactly.
That's interesting. Yep. Why aren't they saying the number? And so then I start looking around and it's only like hearsay, you know, like, oh, this, that, or other. But word around the block was that they had sold like 2,000 less tickets from last time. Now, I don't know if that's due to demand or due to them having to, like, you know, maybe not have as many seats open, different floor plan, whatever. There could be any number of reasons, but like there weren't as many guys in the arena this time around as there were in years in the past. So I don't know if that's due to Rona.
It is Germany, so you can't know. Maybe they don't allow the full capacity or something. Who knows what
exactly. There's all sorts of reasons.
It's another world in it.
And I'm sure they're not saying the number because they want to avoid this kind of speculation.
Yeah, exactly.
In particular.
Yes.
So fair enough. I mean, you couldn't tell. You could, like, the crowd was still mega hype. There was just noise.
Thing is, though, what you're mentioning is actually a classic by the numbers fodder type conversation starter, which is basically that TOs absolutely do intentionally try to fuck with you on how they phrase things so that they know you'll take a perception that isn't what they mean. So I'll give you an example. It's actually something Tommy mentioned recently, Lurpis, but he's correct. Okay. Like, here's a detail a lot of people won't know about history, right? Now, there's that recent story, obviously, that the euro finally dipped below the dollar for you. By the way, that is the first time in many, many years. Like, famously, I used to get paid in dollars a lot of my life, and it fucking sucked, Semler. Because not only did I bring it to Europe, I brought it to bloody UK and converted it into pounds. Like, you can imagine how much I was getting wrecked, right? Well, they're now, in theory, we're finally at a scenario where the dollar's worth slightly more. Well, here's an interesting detail people might not know, but it just shows you how cynical esports and ESL is. Back in the day, because ESL's a German company and primarily European, they used to list their prize money in euros, similar. But what happened was, when it got so that the euro got way too good compared to the dollar in, like, I think it was like around the 2010s, they cynically just switched to listing in dollars. So it looked like the money was more, because obviously that way, if in euros, it would have been like 900,000, you could go $1 million. So they just switched to dollars. So Lopez even said on Twitter, but not for no reason, like, if it goes too far the other way, watch and they'll switch. They'll switch now to euros. So it'll make it sound like a bigger prize pool, because that's esports in a nutshell. It's all just like fucking like snake oil fucking shenanigans, isn't it? Like, oh, this guy can walk now. I can't believe it. It's like, he looks very similar to you. No, he's wearing a beard. What do you mean?
Not at all.
No, it's so ridiculous.
But this is actually, like, it's fun that you bring it up, because it's on like contract negotiations. Have you ever had that issue as well? Because like, certain times it's just like, no, we'll only do dollars, or we'll only do euros, or we'll only do this or that or other currency, because at that time, that's just the way that it's going to go. Like, if you manage to get a contracting euro, then yeah, you're making like time and a half, like you're making away like a bandit on the exchange rate. So that's definitely something that we had to deal with on like that you learn early on in esports when you're dealing with your own contracts, is that depending on where the company's based, it could be more advantageous to wait on the invoice, or sometimes it's like you're not even complaining when they're 6 weeks late. ESL, like paying you, because it's just like, hey, maybe the conversion works out a little bit in your favor at that point or whatever. So that was one thing.
I'll tell you the one no one thinks about, because this is actually how media is not your friend. They will tell you things that might make you take action, and then when actually like something else happens that you would want to know about, they won't inform you. All you need to know is this, Samler. The last few years, when there was that enormous crypto bull market with everyone putting all the money in Bitcoin, etc., I don't know if you know this, but there were actually a few really famous people like in the NFL who announced publicly they were going to take part of their salaries in Bitcoin. Now, here's the thing, Semler. When he was at his peak, they all sounded like geniuses, didn't they? I haven't heard any stories about them recently. It's weird, isn't it? I'd love to know how are you doing on this year's contract? Because logically, you wouldn't want to be paying now, would you? Like, what are you doing? Don't stop. Pay me your money. Like,
stop reading.
Exactly. Like, that's the problem with that story, isn't it? No one ever fills you in on the downside. Like, if that works, yeah, brilliant. But what about the guy it doesn't work for? So
dude, I'm over here wondering, isn't the Staples Center now like the Coinbase Center or something?
Oh, there's also been loads of those.
Like, there's a bunch of those too, where it's like all the exchanges that were buying up property and buying up names and all that sort of thing. It's like, are they going to be good about it? Also, hey, actually, a little bit closer to home. Wasn't that the whole reason for a lot of these North American teams looking to have North American CS teams involved as well? Because they were getting the money, like the money was straight coming in from these crypto companies all of a sudden, and the crypto companies can only invest in Valve.
Yeah, you can't do, obviously the TOs don't let you. Yeah, exactly.
Crypto, you could only do Valve, because Valve didn't care. So you were actively looking to sponsor Dota and CSGO teams. So is that going to be something that's going to dry up, and all of a sudden those sponsorships are going to go away,
to watch
and
for.
We're going to see a slowdown or like perhaps a deflating of the bubble going on again? Things might slow down again in the CS scene without that crypto money just getting injected in. Because again, when it's on the rise and up, then crypto guys are willing to overpay, because they're like, fuck it, we got money, and then everybody's got money. Let's go spend the money. And actually, we're going to get into it a little bit later, but that was a point that Kassad brought up, just about how esports companies spend money. This is on Snakes and Banter this week, guys. Highly recommend Maui, Kassad, Duncan.
It's on this channel. Just click on the YouTube channel.
You can check in the VODs. But Kassad made some good points on that, just how these orgs are spending their money, and we'll elaborate on that a little bit further down the line as well, because it is pretty wild. Just how egregious it can get. But I mean, I guess we should stay all focused on Cologne a little bit. Oh, all right. So already going into the Cologne thing, because this was going to be like the main thing. Last week we talked about groups, and we were kind of giving our predictions on how we thought the playoffs were going to go. One of the things that I was really looking forward to, and I can't remember if I brought it up on the show, but I did bring it up on my stream, where I was like, I really hope that ESL knock it out of the park in terms of the production this time around, because there will have been so much hype around this event. And maybe like stage wise, 5 out of 10. I wasn't impressed in any way. I don't think they did anything to like innovate or do anything crazy. They really just did a bread and butter,
just a normal stage. Yeah.
ESL stage, nothing crazy there at all. Which really does actually kind of speak to ESL's, like their their company, the way that they view things is if it doesn't actually impact viewership on the stream in any way, like measurable way, they're not going to put money into it. It's not going to be interesting for them. It's not about it. For them, it's just about like, what's the direct return 1-for-1 on this investment that we're about to make right now. And so producing this piece of content, does that get more people to tune into the stream? If so, yes, here's the money. If not, not so much. So the stage, I felt like I was a bit let down. I was looking for this sick ceremony. I was looking for all of this, and I didn't really see it. One thing, though, that they did lean into, and this is something that they're going to be able to actually build going forward, and something that nobody else is going to be able to touch and makes it really difficult to create content, is they have all the VODs. They have all the VODs now. They have Face It, they have DreamHack, they have ESL, they have all these years of CSGO VODs. They have ownership of all of this footage, and they actually try to use it. They actually, I mean, they actually tried to create some cool historic pieces around Cologne, like building up the hype for some of these moments. They used like the simple graffiti moment. Like that was cool. They created a little piece in the ad where it's just like, okay, this is the context around this moment, and this is how that graffiti works. They have that footage and all that, so they can make all that happen. Like they did all this kind of cool stuff going back and actually trying to find footage and actually create stuff. So it wasn't just the throw to ad, here's the wait screen, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. It was like they actually tried to use some of their footage, and they actually tried to use some of their VODs to create some cool stuff. And then they built on that with the Cologne stuff as well, with the big opening ceremony for the grand finals, where it's like year after year, hype moment after hype moment in this place. Like they actually were able to start doing some of that. And so kudos to ESL on that point. That I liked. That's the kind of stuff that I really love to see, especially for events like you pointed out that stand on their own. Katowice, Cologne, they don't need to be majors. They don't need extra hype. They're hype enough now as it is because they've been so consistent over the years. So ESL have really got to lean into that now, because they're going to have they're almost up to it. Well, they're not almost up to a decade. I think it was 2015 was the first one off the top of my head.
In the Lanxess, at least, yeah.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Exactly,
Sure.
in the Lanxess, because before that it was at Gamescom, and well, we don't need to think about
Or just their studios or whatever in Cologne, yeah, exactly.
Sure. Well, that's where the ESL
the EMS ones, the major
office
series,
is actually
yeah,
located in Cologne. If you didn't
Yeah.
know, if anybody doesn't know that,
Well, the old
that's
one was, at
ESL
least.
headquarters. They've kind of split up a little bit over in
Yes.
Poland as well. Now they've got their own studios in Poland, and for a while they had their studio in Burbank. They had an office in Burbank, sales team in New York, I think. Like they're kind of spread out, but like Cologne is their home turf. But it's just that was like one thing that stood out to me that I was really looking forward to. I wanted to see what they were going to do, and they actually kind of did it, which my expectations for ESL when it comes to production are down here. In terms of running an event, my expectations are up here, and they deliver on running an event. They make the players happy. They run shit for the most part on time. There aren't major fuck ups on the stream. All that stuff goes. But like the creative side of things, my bar is like way down here when it comes to ESL. And so maybe it's because, that my expectations are so low. They kind of like surprised me a little bit, like, oh, they actually did something great. Okay, cool. Because I never expect anything from ESL, because there isn't a clear one-to-one return for any kind of investment you're doing on that kind of side. For them, that's a big deal. So I don't know. I'm curious, like, was there anything that you were looking forward to going into the event, like production wise or story wise or any of that you got to see, or were you just fully dialed in on gameplay and that's it?
I mean, luckily, because it's like the best tournament in the world with all the best teams, it was going to be good in anyway, as long as the match is delivered. So I'd say mainly as long as you set up the stadium and that, I'm generally happy. In terms of the like side stuff, the problem I have overall is this. I actually do think that now they've gotten like pretty decent at the skits. Like when people will know, I've even said it on this show, when they first started the skits, which coincidentally was like right after Flashpoint was doing them. Like when they first started them, it did look a bit like, make it more fucking obvious that you're just doing it because we just did it, you fucking cynical bastard. And even worse, the first skits they did were like someone who was copying an idea and didn't know what the point of the idea was, because all they did is just take scenes from movies and just change the names, like Mad Lib style. Like that. If you go look at our skits, we created entire skits where the whole premise is fresh and the whole thing's like I'm a crazy doctor, and then what if this player came in and his illness within how he dysfunctionally fits in the team represented as a physical illness? That's a creative idea. Yours was just like, imagine American Psycho, but instead of a card, it's his crosshair in it. It's like, here's the difference between those two ideas. Yours is one where I laugh for a second in the room and go, no, but let's do something better than that. you actually made that happen. Like mine's actually one where it's like, yeah, that's pretty good. But how do we? Well, I've got ideas for that. We do it this way, and then it's fucking really interesting. So with that said, now they've started to finally do some that do have that, like what I want. Like I actually thought those ones where people were going to confession, those were pretty funny. I will say, because this is by the numbers, the one angle about that is nonsense, and this is where I do actually despise the modern world, Semler, because here's the problem. This, in theory, we have to have one position that makes sense. Otherwise, what we do by definition is incoherent. So my problem is this. I don't have a problem with that joke. Like it was a well-executed joke, like Carrigan, for example, basically saying like he needs to bait people or whatever. Nico saying like, what was Nico's angle? Something similar, right? Like they were all saying, oh, he needed to be IGL. That was it. Yeah. You know, like all the angles are funny. The joke is funny and I'm fine with it. But my problem is this. You wouldn't do that same joke and have it be a fucking Muslim preacher, cleric guy. You wouldn't have that in a synagogue and have it be the Jewish rabbi be the one. You would never even consider that because that would actually be considered offensive. So my problem is that, right? It's like, if I'm willing to take a joke, then everyone has to take a joke. If you're not willing to take a joke, stay the fuck out of my shit. I'm just going to say that right now. That's the standard I'm setting in the industry. Because like I say, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I think it's mad hypocritical, especially Semler. And people are going to go, why are you bringing this up? It's totally irrelevant. When you're now owned by Muslims, just going to go ahead and say, maybe when you're owned by a theocratic Muslim fucking country and like theocracy, maybe don't make fun of another major religion. Weird how that works, isn't it?
That would be par for the course, wouldn't it?
Oh, it is, but I know it's just nonsense, isn't it? Like I say, it's not a huge deal, but it's definitely worth pointing out.
Well, it's just, I mean, if you want to go along that route, it's also the whole hammering home of the cathedral of Counter-Strike over and over.
They do it. That's, you know what? That's mainly, let's be real. It's not just ESL, but ESL is famous with the crowd and the stadium angle. In general, in CSGO, I do think we're a bit feckless as an industry like that. Like people are just too, we can have the best event in the world. And instead of just letting it be the best event in the world, we'll ruin it by just constantly sniffing our own farts about the fact it's the best event in the world. That's CSGO in a nutshell. Every event, like that's why I always make those tweets similar, where I'll always make a joke tweet during these events. If this happens, where I'll be like, how's the crowd at IM Cologne this year? I wondered, because they've only mentioned it every 5 minutes on the broadcast. Like, I'm fucking bored of this now. Like, why would I want, remember, I'm not at your venue. Why would I want you to tell me every 5 minutes how sick it is? This is stupid. Like, do it once or twice. Yeah. In fact, by the way, for Cologne, you can even do a little crowd segment if you wanted that. Have a thing where people have come every year since 2016, say what it was like and how epic it is. It's like a major, but yeah, don't hit it every 10 minutes, mate. Come on, don't like drive it into the ground. It becomes not cool then. Like, because it actually, here's the reason why as well, Sam. I'm personally not a fan of that. It just smacks of insecurity. Like, it makes it sound like you don't believe anyone was going to turn up. And then when they turn up, you're like, look at this. I've got a crowd and everything. It's like, mate, you spent like $2 million on the event, you daft fuck. Like, you're making it sound like 4 people were going to turn up. Like, yeah, isn't it supposed to be a legit sport? Didn't you sell the company for $1 billion? Yeah, I would hope there is a crowd. Stop fucking going on about it. I can take you to like the 3rd division football in England. There'll be a crowd at that as well, you fucking idiot. Doesn't make it amazing, does it?
Yeah, it's, you don't want to rail too hard on like.
And I'll just say what I've said every time, Carmack. I'll say it a millionth time though, pal. The reason I know, you know what we said earlier about how when something works for you, you mention it, and when it doesn't, you don't mention it. I'll say what I've said every time, Semler. The year that I'll need to actually give a fuck about any crowd at an ESL event is the year Carmack posts publicly, here was the gate, like the UFC does. Because that's what actually matters. What actually matters is how much did they pay to attend that event. So if it's the UFC, the gate's going to be millions because those are top ticket. That's box office. The reason you don't mention the gate for a Cologne, Semler, isn't because you forgot to. It's obviously worth fuck all, isn't it? The amount would be so pitiful, especially because you could contrast it with concerts and stuff there. The amount would just be so pitiful compared to sports. Like, that's why we just tell you the number of people who went. We don't tell you how much they spent because we aren't ready for those difficult convos. They're a bit awkward right now in esports, especially, by the way, as you also alluded to, sometimes you give away free tickets to sell out, don't you? You just give away the last 2K and magically you've sold out. So usual shenanigans from all the teams.
Dude, that's old as sin. That's the way to do it.
It's classic, isn't it?
It's like sports, all that. Oh, we're doing a giveaway, and anybody who applies, you know, there's a 1 in 10 chance. It's like all 10 of you got tickets.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's just how you save face in it. Yeah, to make sure you still fill it out. Exactly.
Oh yeah, you're gonna do everything you can to fill it out, which is they probably were just hunting down people trying to get them tickets at the end. But I mean, that is just the way that it goes with filling arenas. So no harm there, none of that. It's just it is just an observation. I don't know. It is just an observation. Like if it was something, it is interesting how like the culture is progressing so that you can actually try to make like also the whole like I enjoyed the fact that they used the footage, but it really was like, gong. It was all about the church bells. I don't know. Like that used to mean something. There was something there. There's something there. I don't know what I'm trying to say other than just, I think the point is that you wouldn't make that with Muslims in mind, or you wouldn't make that with Jews in mind. You would, but with Christianity, it's just open season. You can do whatever you want with Christianity.
It's weird how that goes, isn't it? Especially bearing in mind, I'll just say this: don't the exact people who make fun of that exact type of religion always go on about being inclusive and about how it's about tolerance and about how we all have to like get along and care for each other and be compassionate? That weird how it doesn't matter when your fundamental values of how the universe operates are in question. Funny how that works, isn't it? Yeah. There you go. Other 3/4 of the world, you can all get fucked too.
It's not like these people think of the other 3/4 of the
no,
world.
of course, who gives a fuck?
Now, what they give a fuck about is how the playoffs played out. So I was going into this where I was thought, okay, because that's what we talked about last time. I was saying that I thought that the experience would play out in the first round, and well. First one went down pretty much the way that I expected it.
Yep.
Astralis barely managed to make it through Maus, but they made it through. And that's what I was saying. It's like the experience on the teams is what's going to work out for them. They're going to be able to carry on and get into the next round. They'll get soundly destroyed by Navi and FaZe, but they'll have made it through. Half of that came true because Astralis managed to make it through, but then Movie Star Riders actually managed to pull off the upset against Liquid. And then just proceed to get utterly obliterated by FaZe Clan, where it wasn't even like they were showing up in the same way. The guys who had carried so far totally vanished. Deaths tried to make some kind of move out of it against FaZe. He showed up a couple times, but really, I guess Team Liquid can't really feel too bad about it because it was almost like Alicia's performance happening on Mirage versus Furia, where he just does a 1.8 rating and manages to just barely just smash through. They get through in 2 maps, and it's a lot of to do with Alicia just managing to force that through. Movie Star Riders, that third map was just deaths through and through. Career level performance on that map to get his team through that and managed to pull off the win. So I mean,
that's why you had to know it was never going to last, though, because here's the problem, right? The other series they were winning, Semler, were like basically. The irony was, right, the one that they played great in but lost was when they'd played Navi in the group decider game. They actually played quite well in the first couple of maps there. Every other series was obviously all the shocking wins they had over the big names, right? They were just outright outplaying those teams. When you watch the Team Liquid series, though, like for real, after watching 20 years of Counter-Strike, I can tell you the way that game was playing out was like this. It was exactly like the classic fucking underdog letdown. They could have won in 2, but they didn't. So it goes to 3. And then when it goes to the third map, TL was looking like, hey, they're starting to warm up. Like they're looking strong. They're on CT side now, so they just have to hold. Like suddenly, like all these like Movistar pushes are just getting obliterated. And it just looks like TL's just going to cruise now and win. But here's the problem. Like not only did TL sort of, I think, actually like bottle it a little bit. Like if you saw, they did like all, like they just decided to do, when they were finally into like a potentially winning position, TL just did like a load of like, I wouldn't even say coordinate, just pushes across the map, and they actually lost most of those rounds. And then here's the problem. Here's why you know that the win from Movistar was like the last fucking gasp of the Cinderella run. Because that Deaths guy had 27 or 30 kills or something on that map. He's the IGL, for fuck's sake. He's not like a star player. So like that is a once in a lifetime performance you're going to get. Think about that on stage at the Lanxess in Cologne. Like that barely got you over the line, but it did. So the problem goes when you then go to play a FaZe. Like, look, you can see what you like about TL. FaZe is a very legit team, and they were absolutely going to have way more win conditions. So that's why I always say, if you're an expert and an analyst, the reason we hate underdogs, it's not actually because of the underdog, it's just the effect it has on the tournament. Like the difference is Team Liquid versus FaZe would have been a very interesting prospect. Like that would have been a match a lot of people would like to see, not least because like TL has players like Nikindar, like they can go head to head with those FaZe players. They could do something. The guys from Movistar, they'd already, by the way, accomplished a lot by making top 6. To make top 4 was a miracle. Like Like, I didn't have any expectations for them at that point in time. And also, it's just a way too good a map pool. So that's why if you're Movistar, like, you made it further than you even should have. Like, this really was a miracle run. Like, it's everything you could hope for. But also, if you go back to that last episode, mate, I nailed it because I even predicted what these fuckers would do. I told you, because of the scoreboard, everyone's going to overreact to the Son Pius guy and they're going to make out like he's like the new Ziwu or something. But if you actually look, by the way, here's the thing. My analogy is he's like the Spanish device. He doesn't actually try, like, he doesn't have like a super fucking combat AWP style. He's not like Brokey, like flicking all the time. He is like the traditional AWPer in Counter-Strike. He takes his position really far away. He zooms in on the angle. And if you go like really close to the crosshair, he kills you every time. That's why he's like device. All the like easy shots, he doesn't miss those. He just hits all those. But you also saw, here's the difference though. That's why on CT side, he can rack up all the kills. But on T side, he's not some like superstar player, guys. He's not taking over the game. You're not building all squad. He had the T side on the same map of Ancient, where he just did fucking nothing. So the problem with that guy is he's a good player, but he was never going to like 1v9 a whole stage match against FaZe. That's unrealistic to think that was going to happen. So I think Movistar, like, it's a fun run. I think there are some things you can take. Like, I think you can take some like judgment of how good some of the players are, but I don't think this team's ever going to do a run like this again. I think this was like this really was like, as harsh as it sounds, like you caught fire a bunch of times in a row and then eventually you cooled off.
That's the way that it's
it
seems to me as well, though. But I mean, that happens. I mean, we saw it, for sure. Like the obvious comparison was with Copenhagen Flames. We kind of did that last week as well, with the comparison where it's like they peaked really hard, they looked freakishly good. All of a sudden they're competing, they're doing great, but you're just sitting there thinking, okay, but do they have the stamina to keep going? Do they have the stamina to keep carrying on with this? And the answer is I don't think so right now. Not from what I've seen. I think this is where the point that I was making last time around is that when you actually go up against top tier teams that have analysts and that have coaches and that have guys who are just going to literally sit there and figure out what it is that you're doing, guys like Sampaio, all of a sudden you talk about him fading on the T side. Well, if Liquid know what your tendencies are on T side Ancient, if they prepared for you, it's going to be a whole lot harder for you to be able to execute your game. And that's the difference between an entry-level amateur kind of player who's got a few tools in his toolbox versus a guy like Simple who's got the whole garage. You know, he doesn't matter what you do. This tool, fine, I'll go over here. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's going to have all of the options, right? So that's just the way it is. It's perfectly fine. It was a terrific performance from him. And I got a little miffed that they had that upset, because obviously I had predicted Liquid because I really wanted to see Liquid FaZe. But then fair enough, it's just like, that's the way it goes. And Liquid themselves, wasn't exactly the prettiest.
I'll even give you an angle that Maui Snake made on Snake and Banter that I thought was a very shrewd one. He just didn't complete the thought, basically.
Maui usually does come in with the goods. Like,
he said that there was an interview done at some point during the event with like someone like Deaths or someone, I can't remember who it was, from Movistar Riders, and that basically when they were asked as they were getting all these wins, like, how are you doing it? Like, what's the secret? He said essentially they didn't really have an answer. It was just all like vague waffle, like, oh, we have to play together. Like, here's the reason why. That might sound like, well, it's just interviews, isn't it? No, because here's what Maui didn't finish the thought of, but I think I know what he means. Basically, what you need the guy there to say to feel like it's legit is something like, oh, we figured out something on Mirage and we swapped like a CT position, or or like we've been really like anti-stratting all the teams on our T side. If you heard that, you'd be like, oh, maybe there's something to build off. If instead everyone's just sort of like, we are having a good tournament. Everyone's French, by the way. I don't know Spanish accent, so everyone's French. We are having a good tournament. Ooh la la. Like, that's not enough, is it? Like, you're going to have a bad tournament next. Like, that ain't good enough, is it? Like, one of the things I always think is an absolute privilege and a fucking blessing that was given to me, Semler, is that in school, one of the only accents I was good at was the French accent. And then, remember, in CS 1.6, we barely had any fucking
there were no
French. They were like almost irrelevant. Source. And then I obviously wasn't in source. So that when they just came into CSGO and they were like amazed, I was like, there we go. Right, write that down. That character can stay. As I've pointed out in the past, put it this way, I was really good when it used to be a Happy impression, if we're being real. But then once Happy became irrelevant, I have to soften it a bit. And it had to become a mixture of Shocks or Smiths, depending on the scenario.
That was it.
By the way, I've got a random story. Here's what we have to do also with this show. This show has to also be used, now that Semler's got the statute of limitations off his career, we have to tell some of the old stories, right? So as long as this isn't too, you told me if it's too much for you, it can always be edited out. There can always be the old timestamp. Although usually I will say timestamps tend not to be usually for you. It's usually for me, but maybe now the other person gets a timestamp. So all I'll say is this. There was a story back in the day. If you think it's out of bounds, just tell me and we'll cut it, don't worry. But I think it's funny as fuck, right? This is one of the early areas that I knew I was a bad influence on Semler. If you don't know, by the way, boys, yeah, I am that kid where when you were young, people are like, oh, you're a bad influence. I'm like, I'm not doing shit. Your little fucking kids following my lead, you little bitch. Like, raise a fucking leader in your own. But anyway, obviously, I was the bad kid. Like that, right?
I want to hear this.
So I remember in the early days, like all the early events, like 2015, 2016, obviously we would always be talking, me, you, Richard, Anders, the whole group of people from the green room. And what happened was Semler famously was the only one of us who could fluently speak French. So he used to go, and all those guys in Berry Games and Titan and LDLC, you know, all those Envy, all those teams he would always be hanging out with, because obviously you can get the info from them and someone else he can talk to. Back then, by the way, even most of them actually, funnily enough, even though they could speak English, that was actually back when they were all shy and didn't like to speak to none. So it was even like, I'm sure it benefited them to have people they could talk to, you know, and have a connection to the scene. And what happened was, because of these convos, though, they actually felt like they'd sort of like accepted Semler into their group. Because you have to remember, Semler's got that fucked up scenario where to us, it's like, you're French, but then to everyone French, they're like, he is fucking American, he is fucking scum. Like, so you're in that like nightmare middle ground, aren't you? So anyway, right, I didn't think this through. I thought, whatever, it's just French with them, innit? Whatever. So all you need to know is this, right? Obviously, this was the era, 2015, 2016, where I was just roasting Smiths like every event. Like half of those highlight videos of me are just like talking about Smiths getting his arsehole ripped open, like he's shit, like fucking shocks his friend, like ceiling checks, like 5K decoy minutes, all the classics. Everyone knows them all. Well, all you need to know is this, right? Even though obviously Smiths would know, I don't give a fuck, and I'm going to say that anyway, so there's no point complaining to me. He actually got mad at Semler because his take was sort of like, Semler, why are you laughing at these jokes? You do not respect me. I bring you into my friend group. We are friends. Me, like, and he got like really upset just from what I've done. Though it wasn't even like you've done anything, dude. It's just that you were laughing at the joke. Let's be real, like you were laughing quite hard, but even so, like, because the problem is they felt like all this. I know they felt like you sort of like turned up. You betrayed them. You Judased them. That's what they felt like. Semler.
It's that's it. The Judas. I was here. The black sheep of the group.
Exactly.
No, the wolf in sheep's clothing. Yes, Ms. Ami. Hello.
Because I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do anyway. Don't worry about it.
I do. You know, that's the thing, dude. It's like we go back on these stories, but I do actually like legit miss those times because
I'll do with the shit. Yeah,
it feels like those times everybody was at the same hotel. There was no like spreading people out across the city or any of that. It was like everybody was at the same hotel.
Yeah.
So everybody was always at the hotel bar shooting the shit. You were just like you the level of access that you had to the players to even just like shoot the shit about anything, just like hang out in general.
Oh, for sure.
It feels like it was way more back then than it is today when you go to a venue. I mean, there's some players that'll still hang out or whatever, but like that's not.
Yeah. If people don't know, almost everything's changed in that sense. Like for example, now events last so long. When people get knocked out at the beginning, they just fly home. They just go home the next day. Yeah,
they don't even stick around.
We're talking about the era where it was like a 3 or 4 day event. You just come to the event, you stay there the whole time, as you say. Every time it's a morning and evening before a match, everyone's there. You can just go meet that guy there. Nips over there. Envy's back here. Like everyone was around.
Everybody was like much more open about just like hanging out and. You know, it'd be like blowing off steam at the end of the day.
For sure, yeah.
Fucking long day. Everybody's, you know, frazzled or whatever. And everybody's just having a beer before going to sleep. And then it's just like you're hanging out and shooting the shit. Those were fucking good times, man. Yeah, they're thinking about it. But no, Smith's now I actually remember this, dude.
Because that's all you need to know. That's how far esports has gone, Semler. Back then, I was the bad influence. Now people think you're the bad influence on me for making me hate women or whatever they think we do. No, I don't fucking know. I don't even give a fuck. Sounds lead into that joke. Like, yeah, whatever, you know.
Do you see that? Dude, I gotta, man. This is where it's like we need to have these images that just pop up in the stream because, like, do you see that Instagram story I forwarded today where it's just like Bill Burr just fucking roasting the WNBA? Like, you won't even tune in for the WNBA. It's been 5 years of the same bullshit.
Dude, that's the same point I make about the ESL tournament.
This sounds very familiar. Where have I heard this story before? Huh?
Because people don't get it, by the way. I actually genuinely believe that when it comes to the CSGO tournament, you're the one telling people this needs to exist. You're saying all the reasons it's good, and you're saying that we should support it, but you won't support it. And by the way, I don't mean you won't support, like you won't buy a ticket. You won't even turn it on your bloody monitor. You won't even turn it on the monitor to count one hit. That's about the minimum you could possibly do. So in that scenario, that's, by the way, in a nutshell, what I despise about people who are virtue signalers. It's like you yourself don't even live what you claim to live, but you're going to waste your time lecturing me. Get the fuck out of my face. Because you know one thing in general, by the way, as a quick aside, and we'll get back to CS3 after.
Sure.
As a quick aside, the reason I think I'm really different to other people when it comes to all that culture war shit is too many other people start in the middle with the person they're debating with. I don't, Semler. If some random person comes along, like good old Frankie did a few years ago, someone just pops out of nowhere. As far as I'm concerned, remember, I don't know them from fucking Eve, mate. They just spawn out of the universe. And the first thing they do is go, you have to explain and justify why you do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I don't have to do fucking anything, homie. You have no jurisdiction over me. I don't have to respect you. I don't have to listen to your points. You have no points. You have made no like actual case for what you're saying. You haven't provided any evidence. I don't have to do jack all, mate. So the difference is other people go, no, but I'm not racist. It's like, I don't need to even start with that, mate. You can build your case and then come to me. You let me know when you're someone worth listening to. Because all these people weren't, were they? I mean, what they've shown is they were just a bunch of opinions that were just thrown into the wind. And they hoped the wind blowed the right way that week. And they seem like they support the thing, but then when they actually came down to supporting the thing, you're nowhere to be found. We're any here. So let's get back at anyway. Luckily, though, this CS show does actually stick by its principles. We only care about world-class Counter-Strike. So enough about that ESL shite and go back and IM Cologne.
I was about to say, but like this is the good ESL shite. That's the thing. We want to talk about the good.
Exactly.
So
if I was going to spend blood money, I'd put on a really good tournament, not a shit one with all fucking the women who go, oh, wish I were going to be pro. Well, there's some dead people's money that we made off their corpses. Do you want to have a good game? Oh, love it. Oh, fuck. Don't put any men in my video. Don't put any men in my blood money video game. That'd make it hard for me. That'd be rude. What a fucking world we live in. Essentially, Semler, real women in real life have to die so that we can have a video game tournament where women expressly don't play men so that other real women don't get their feelings hurt. I think we've actually finally completed some sort of fucked up like equation for how SJWs process like human suffering into their own like ego aggrandization there, haven't we? What the fuck is that? That's insane. When you frame it like that, it's pretty rough, isn't it? It's pretty rough.
It just starts, I'm just wondering, when does it start collapsing on?
Oh, the other one as well.
We're just going to spawn a black hole and just get...
Technically, I never said this on By the Numbers, so let's get it on the record. I actually thought the most amazing story ever happened the other week. Because as everyone will know, as I've gotten to great pains to point out, obviously, Saudi Arabia, through the private and public investment fund, bought Savvy Gaming, bought ESL and Face It. We all know that, right? And essentially, there was just a direct connection to the leader of Saudi Arabia. Well, obviously, the United States President, Joe Biden, because he's, in theory, trying to publicly sort of play negotiation games about the oil and all that jazz with the whole energy crisis, he basically publicly threatened Saudi Arabia, right? So I even said on Twitter, this is amazing. Because what that means, think about it, the US president is the United States president is threatening ESL, because Saudi Arabia owns ESL. And how would he carry out that threat on ESL? With the US Air Force, one of ESL's main sponsors. We're at like a Monty Python level now, guys. Like, we can't even satirize this shit. It's better. Like, esports would put the Onion out of business when there's no way it could run. Like, you can't make a more ridiculous headline than that. Like, the United States president threatens ESL's owner with ESL's sponsor. Like, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, what a crazy line that exists and is real.
The issue with being on the internet now is that half of the time you can't tell if it's satire or if it's real anymore. It's like, nah, this can't be real. Turns out, yes, it is. Yes, it is actually real. This is the reality that we live in now. Terrific.
Anyway, going back to the IM Cologne scenario. Luckily, here's the good side about what happened. Even if Liquid had made it, Liquid probably does lose it. Luckily, this final was always destined to happen. It was always going to happen. Like, these are the two best teams. These are even the teams, by the way, that I even think have the cool element of a true rivalry, where each of them really does think they're number one and that the other one's slightly worse. They really do. Like, the FaZe guys clearly think they can win. But if you notice, every time Semler Na'Vi wins these semis and is about to go play the major final, about to go and play this final against FaZe, they always in the interviews say they're the best and that they're going to win and that they're number one. So what I love is this, right? It's not just that you have like back and forth. What you want is like a true rivalry, because what makes this match great, in my opinion, Na'Vi versus FaZe, is just the eye test tells you both teams could win all these matches. Like, I saw people doing that on the major final. Look, if you want to criticize the major, here's what you can criticize. You could debate maybe they shouldn't have like drafted Nuke as their map. That's one angle. The other angle is like, obviously Simple didn't play Superstar CS, but even then he wasn't like, it's like he fed the whole game. That's about it. Aside from that, Na'Vi was still in that final. They almost won the Inferno game. It would have been 3 maps. In this one, by the way, if you're a Na'Vi guy, I get why you'd be upset you lost because it was so close. But mate, this was one of the closest finals I've ever seen ever play. Like, There's a world absolutely Navi wins this. Navi could have 3-0'd it, mate. It's like this was a really great match, and it was one where at the end, look, I know no pro players really going to agree with my sentiment because they can't. They're pros who played the game, but I actually feel similar. Like if you're ever in a truly epic match like this, it's a bit like in the UFC. You know, if you have like an amazing UFC title fight, even if you lose on some level, you're going to just be kind of like proud, like I was in like a classic match, though. Like that's going to be remembered. Like that was like true entertainment. That's what that final's like. Like even if you're Navi and you're lost, like just thanks for the game. It was fucking amazing. It was a brilliant match.
This is like the final that pushed everything to extremes now.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
In terms of like the current meta, how the game is played, how long. Like to me, it's still free. Like I know I was talking about it on the broadcast because we did that watch party together. Like,
7-hour watch party, of course.
8 hour, yeah, the 8 hour long broadcast. It was like 7 hours worth of finals. It was just like holy shit. Now, so just imagine staying sharp in a game like Counter-Strike where you can't just like go off and it's not like I was trying to think about it where it's just like, you got those guys who run like ultra marathons or whatever. And it's like, they just get off into their happy place. They're not necessarily focused, dialed in 100%. They're kind of just like one foot after the other.
Out a bit.
Need to think. Don't think you have my trick. I have my trick of thinking like, oh, it's just one more step. It's just one more mile. It's just whatever. But they're not like fucking dialed in, like zeroed in on the screen, really watching everything the way that you have to be in order to play a match of CS. These guys did that 5 maps for fucking 7 hours and are still playing elite level CS, not missing a beat. Just like, holy shit, the level of stamina involved with these guys being able to compete like this was nuts. And I know everybody's like, oh, well, they play 12 hours a day, that's just a regular thing. It's like, not all of them, and not on a main stage in front of an arena.
Oh, a live match is different from just scrims, of course.
It hits different.
Of course.
You're the adrenaline dump, the big rounds, the crowd, the reaction, everything. Your blood is spiking all over the place. You're doing like, it's all just the physical aspect of the game kicks in like none other compared to being, to playing at home, which was always the criticism of online CS. It's just not the same. And here you have a best of 5 final that goes all the way, and these guys are still playing at an elite level. I know
how to solve the problem.
Really blew my mind.
If there's a team out there that complains that, but the stamina you need for a best of 5, so all right, I'll just hire that.
I don't like that argument.
No, just hire David Goggins. Just have David Goggins be the coach. Get hard, like Nico. Come on, you fucking pussy. We're just gonna quit now. Fuck off. Like that'll be amazing. He
carry the logs.
Exactly.
Dude,
exactly.
But that is the thing. Okay, like it goes either way, because this would have been.
I forgot about. No, it was the boats. Yeah, like who's going to carry the boats?
Who's going to carry the boats?
The boats, Nico. The boats.
Who's going to lift the logs? They don't know me. Yeah, dude, Goggins is the shit. If you don't know Goggins, go and check Goggins out.
It's definitely a good Google.
Fuck with your head.
Google that.
All right, what do you like? All right, already though, because this was kind of like the idea that we were kicking around, where it's like this could have been equally an epic best of 3 with how close it was.
Oh, of course, yeah, sure.
As far as the maps, but like in a best of 3, do you think we see Overpass or Ancient, or do those maps not happen at all, and we get the Inferno, Mirage, Nuke, Veto?
That's the other aspect to best of 5 that no one ever brings up. Notice best of 5 also tests the map pool. You really get to go all over the place. You have to really prove that you're consistently good, because I agree in a final, and by the way, especially when it's 2 teams who are like both think they're number 1, etc., I think this is way more likely like teams would have just done like the handshake and played the middle maps, and then you try and do that, because that's the downside also to a BO3 is what if both teams try like the punish pick as like some crazy shit. It can also ruin the series. It means that you both try to pick like the map that's the worst for the opponent, and it might make it, you might win it, but it might make it a bad game,
Yeah, that was what I was worried about as well going into it. But like thinking back on it this morning when we were looking at it again, it's just like it could have been an epic best of 3, obviously, because Mirage and Nuke FaZe clearly had a game plan for Mirage. They clearly had Na'Vi figured out on that, and Na'Vi, Na'Vi were fair enough to them. They were saying they were making loads of mistakes themselves, but I mean, some of those mistakes, they're not unforced. It's Kerrigan getting in their heads. It's the players on FaZe's side that are prepared and got an idea of it, and then Nuke as well. Like FaZe had a game plan on Nuke. They looked really dialed in.
Oh, by the way, that's one thing that has pissed me off recently. I will say, unfortunately, it's because Na'Vi has an enormous fan base. So it means you're going to get a lot of stupid people within that fan base. But I've seen a lot of sentiment that I thought was whack as fuck similar, where basically people were like flaming Na'Vi for losing that final. Because, for example, like the Ancient game or whatever, they were up like 15-4 or something mad, and then there was that comeback to OT. They were saying all that to me, like, Na'Vi just throws, all Na'Vi does is throw it. It's basically like the same shit narrative they use for Team Liquid. The problem with that narrative is this. No, they don't. You mean when they're against FaZe Clan in some of the most epic finals ever, FaZe Clan can do a comeback? First of all, FaZe Clan's really good at doing comebacks against everyone. And secondly, if the only other team that can make you throw is the other best team in the world, you're not playing bad then, are you? You're just not playing peak CS. Because I thought that was like a really over aspect. Like, Na'Vi didn't throw this final. Yes, they had rounds that were bad. They had rounds they misplayed or made the wrong choice. It was a mega final, though. This was a really high level of CS in general, I thought.
Already that point alone, Mirage. If you go back to Na'Vi versus Astralis on Mirage, they're down 12-3 on Mirage and they fucking come back. It's like, that's a team that's throwing? No, that's a team that knows, that has that supreme winning confidence, that knows they can win. Doesn't matter the score. It's just one round after another, baby. It's just one round at a time. And if you have that confidence, you know you can win it. It doesn't matter what the score is. You can win. You can just utterly dominate your opponents. And that's exactly what Na'Vi did. Freaking round after round, perfect. One of the crazy comebacks in a semifinals in the stage like that. So like the whole idea that Na'Vi are throwing, it's like, get out of here. They have that killer instinct.
They have, that
confidence.
As I say, if it was anyone other than FaZe, dude, they would have won. They would have just won this match. Like, it wasn't that they threw in that sense. Also, by the way, if you're going to be a Na'Vi fan, think especially of Na'Vi in this sense. How are you as a Na'Vi fan just going to accept it? Like every time Na'Vi has a round, they had one in this tournament, dude, where like they had like Simple on a scout and then they had like fucking Deagles for everyone else and they won this like CT. I think it was on Mirage. They won like a CT against like a gun round against FaZe. If you're going to happily go, we take those, then you also take the time you lose a fucking gun round, you twat. You're not even supposed to win that round. You're economically low against like a fucking full buy. So you have to take the rough with the smooth in Counter-Strike. Grow the fuck up, fans. There's never going to be a best of 5 where everyone plays perfect CS. You couldn't play perfect CS. So like people overvalue that aspect. It's just salt basically when their team loses.
Scrappy, dude. Just like remember Overpass, remember Ancient. Like this is where, you know, clips are pretty slick. You know, you can actually go back and check it. But like Brokey and Rops, like 2 rounds where it's just as close as you can go, and it just doesn't happen to go their way in the clutch, and that costs the map. And then it happens again. So Overpass happens with Brokey not managing to stop the diffuse, and then the same thing on Ancient. Rops barely misses out on that clutch. It could have gone the other way for FaZe. FaZe could have very easily 3-0'd this whole thing. You know, Inferno would have been a bit of a touch and go scenario, but like Overpass and Ancient, if those clutches go the other way, we're going into more rounds, and all of a sudden it's a totally different picture here from Na'Vi. Instead, it's Na'Vi that just like barely get it to break their way. That's how close it was in this.
FaZe had some miracle shit happen in this final. Like, not only did they have some amazing clutches that had to be won, but I'm just thinking, even the way that nuke game ended on the 5th map, similar. Twists was like running out and just 2-1 bulleting people in the head, just open a sight. Like, normally, if people don't know, if you're a casual fan, the end of a game, especially like 5th game of a best of 5 and you're on T-side nuke, that's when you go slower. If anything, mate, you get a bit more nervous. You don't want to throw your life away. You don't just rush. By the way, that's what's even cool that they won that way, because it was the same way they won the major. Carrigan did that crazy rush as well, if you remember, on up to Hut. So I love it when people make decisive ballsy plays that they win.
So go ahead.
No, go on.
No, but this was according to Twist as well. Apparently, he talked to some fans on his Discord afterwards. But like, this is a set strategy. So people were like, you know, how did Electron not hear? Was it right? Because I was speculating this morning. I'm like, well, you know,
they knew it somehow covers the sound.
Exactly. Right. There's so much going on. It's hard to plan that sort of thing. Maybe Twist, you know, everything just stars aligned and it's perfect that he goes in. But apparently, Twist says that that's a legit strategy that they call Canada, and that he's supposed to go when all the utility is popping. That's when he's supposed to jump off a silo so that there's no noise. And sure enough, Electron just gets smashed in the side of the head. He has no idea what happened. So he's dead, and Twist gets 2 kills because then he gets the guy in mini immediately, and it all just falls apart immediately for Na'Vi. So fucking brutal round. So cool to see. And also just to have the awareness to be able to call that kind of strategy when it matters like that. Like, again, I mean, it's just kudos to Kerrigan. And I really feel like I have to look more into this Inner Shine guy. Because like that's the one thing, and it's actually something that's like something that you guys were talking about with Casada a little bit in terms of like you know, coaches and analysts and like their impact on the game. But I am very curious now to try and figure out like more about this Inner Shine guy and more about like the Na'Vi side of things, because it's not Blade who's doing it all on Na'Vi's side either. He has to have help. So like, what's the infrastructure like on these two teams now? Because they really feel like they're pushing the bar in terms of preparation, in terms of the game. They're raising the bar, and it feels like they are closest perhaps to having the system that works, whether it's just good players with like one analyst and a coach, or is it a whole analytical team on the side of Na'Vi that's feeding that info in to Blade? Like, I don't like, we need to figure out a little bit more of like what the back end looks like for these teams now, because it feels like they're ready for each other and they're just head and shoulders above everybody else right now. Like, I don't, you know, they seem untouchable in that respect. So a little bit of a I guess I have to fill the investigative journalist side of things or whatever. Maybe
to me, the only angle about this final that I actually do think you can criticize on Navi is just Simple's performance. Like basically, the first couple of maps he was rolling, he was doing totally fine. He was looking good. He was getting loads of kills. If you notice though, the last three, he definitely does start to like drop down in performance level. And here's where it's tough. This is what's tough because it's not like he's bad. Like if people don't know, there's literally only 3 players in the entire series got more kills than him over the 5 maps. So it's not like he's bad. He definitely didn't feed and throw the game or whatever. But the problem is, if you're Navi, like remember, it's with good reason he won the MVP after this final still, because his stats for the whole tournament were still nuts. He was still incredibly
still top 3.
Very, very strong performance. But the issue is, this is the final. Like this is where all he needs is like, if he takes over one of those last 3 maps, he could have won the game for them. They could absolutely have won. So the issue I have is this, since in Simple's case, we don't just call him good. We call him the GOAT. We call him number 1 in the world. We call him the best player of all time. In that scenario, like, it's not like I'm going to say you suck because you didn't, but those are the stakes you're playing at. People expect you to deliver every time. If you are a Michael Jordan type character, sorry, they expect you to be the hero. You're supposed to win the game. And that's one thing actually that I'm looking at a little bit now, because when I look at the major final, I look at this one now, I also get the vibe personally. I think FaZe is harder for Simple generally to play against. I'm not sure why. I'd have to spitball reasons, but like, It just seems like this one team has done a half decent job. Like if you go and look at all the times they've played during the year, he just doesn't go off as often as he seems to against the other squads. Like this seems like a team that somehow is able to, I wouldn't say neutralize him. He's not as dominant though. And it's cost him a couple.
Oh, it depends on how far down this path we want to go. Cause it's just like, all right, so say this whole marathon aspect of it, right? I mean, there's no getting around it that Simple looks like he's put on a bit of weight recently. And obviously there's going to be plenty of excuses for that because of just what the fuck is going on. But I wonder.
He always says he lives out of a suitcase, right?
Yeah, he lives out of a suitcase. It's not a healthy lifestyle.
No,
You're
of course
living
not.
in hotel rooms for months at a time. You're not getting good food. It's really hard to have a decent diet. It's really hard to have decent sleep. It's really hard to keep a steady schedule. All of these things lead to good health, right? Good performance. Athletes, there's a reason why athletes, they go to sleep at the same time, they wake up at the same time, they get it 8-9 hours of sleep a night. They're constantly, just trying to fine tune these things. And in a best of 3 that lasts 3 to 4 hours, okay, maybe you can get away with it. But if you're going into that 6th, 7th, 8th hour worth of having to stay focused, the mental, the physical has to play a role. That I've said this like so many times, but it always blew my mind that way back, even in like 2014, I think, Fnatic. So it blew my mind that already back then they were starting to think about this, but Fnatic was the first team that I'd heard of that actually eliminated soft drinks and all candy from their players' diets during tournaments. They were not allowed to have Coke. They were not allowed to have that Monster. They weren't allowed to have anything that had sugar in it. They could have like the sugar-free Coke or the sugar-free or the coffee or tea, right? But they couldn't have anything with sugar in it just because they wanted to maintain that steady energy throughout the day, right? They were the ones who were actually starting to look at this sort of thing back then. Like, okay, performance level, how to on a physical side of things, like how much does this have an impact? And like, if we can keep you focused. So again, it's like, how far do we want to push in terms of, because if you're going to start having more and more matches like this, where it's a 2-week long event and you're going to have days where you're just on it for hours at a time, like, when are we going to start seeing more of the focus on the physical side of things that actually start to, could the physical side of things make the difference for a guy like Simple at that, where he's like solid on the first couple of maps and then just starts to drop off perhaps as the day goes on?
But it's weird. I don't know if, like, as you said, you're talking about the physical side. So obviously, you can see he has put on some weight. He looks a bit chubbier now, etc.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's like, it's noticeable.
But like, I would say this. I wouldn't actually, I'm more concerned about like the mental state, quite frankly, because here's the issue I have. Even though like you have to realize when you're exceptionally as good as Simple as, he could easily cover if he's not on his game because he's so mega, he can still be number 1. Like that's the luxury of being so absurdly talented. But I have to say, if you look at the way he's behaved the last few months, basically ever since they knew, and it was implied around the major that someone was leaving, we didn't know it was Boomich at the time. We all thought it was Electronic, obviously. But as soon as we knew the lineup was going to get broken up, he's been doing those, like, his messaging has been really weird. Like, you notice multiple times he sort of implied he might take a break. Like maybe he just takes a few months off or leaves the lineup and has a sabbatical or something. Like
he's streaming Valorant.
And then it's just because they won Blast and they had a little bit of success now that he implied now he won't, and now he's going to stay probably, and now maybe someday. Like, I get the sense like he's pretty uncertain himself. It's just like I say, I think it's being masked by the fact that if you're top of the stats, people are going to assume everything must be great.
Yeah, that's the thing. Obviously, it's like, how could he be? How could it's when you're going to show up and perform like that day after day. We're not even getting, like, food is one thing. We don't even know like how hard he's boozing, if he's boozing a lot or not.
I can know,
like that, that can also have an impact on your focus, your memory, your ability to dial in. So I mean, there's all these sorts of things like extracurricular, game, you know, that's not real, that could be playing an impact and could be weighing him down a little bit. But yeah, again, it's going into the player break. Now he's going to have 2 to 3 weeks to reset, and hopefully, you know, we'll see that jump back up in form.
Also, by the way, this is how unfair we are in esports. Even though, to be fair, like, I guess people did make a big deal out of it when it was FaZe had the stand-in and the one kind of eats it, etc. We all do just pretend as well. Like, when everyone is going in on simple, like, I didn't perform well enough, we're all just acting like him having a guy who's only played like 2 tournaments now as a stand-in. It's just like, that's the real team. That's how crazy the fragging is on Na'Vi and how good Simple is. We don't even give him a pass for having a fucking stand-in. Like, remember, that guy isn't even the permanent player yet. Like, I do suspect because of how he did at these tournaments, they probably will sign him. Like, it just feels like they're vibing with him or whatever. But like every other team, we give you a leeway if you have not the real lineup. Like, we're not really even doing that for Na'Vi, even though absolutely, mate, they almost won this tournament with the stand-in. So mad props in general to Na'Vi.
It's like their own curse. Like, Electronic hardly saw a dip in his performance. It's
for sure.
Wild. He
was mega.
Like a 1.16 rating at the end of the event. You're just sitting here thinking, you're supposed to be calling. You're supposed, you know, you got Kerrigan down there with like a 0.96 at the end of the day. That's the opposing in-game leader from the grand finals, right? Head to head. And Electronic is up there fragging like a star. There's just so much firepower.
Here's the other angle as well. Here's the other reason why, if I was a Na'Vi player or a Na'Vi fan, I wouldn't be at all like distraught at this result. I would think, hey, let's get him next time. Run the game back, play the game. Here's another reason why. Yeah. Because just like the major, this was the only other tournament this year, Semler, where bizarrely Rain just had the throwback tournament. Like, yeah, again, even in the final, like, if people don't know, it was like the major again. The fifth map was Nuke, and when he went CT side, he just started doing it again. He just started pulling off like the fucking outside Nuke tutorial demo of like, here's how you control it. Like, what are you doing? This is the fucking final. So again, if you're Na'Vi, you can't expect that's going to happen. But if it does happen in your phase, you're going to win the game, hopefully. If your fourth best player goes off like that.
That was the other reason why I wanted to really look into Innershine, because there was a rumor going around that it was like Innershine took Rain aside going into that Nuke, and he was like, this is how you're going to play it. Like, this is what's going on. I think Chad said something like that on Twitter, right? Yeah, exactly. Something like that, where it's like, apparently it was just like, Rain, I'm going to give you all the tools necessary. Now go forth and conquer. And sure enough, Rain, clearly, you know, you saw it in terms of an individual performance, total beast. I mean, obviously Twists is just a total freak as well. He's really coming into his own on the team. Performing on the T side, only one, I think it was like positive in the finals on the T side in terms of stats. Actually, I can take
it was right now. He was the only one
out of all of the other players, you know, who was actually kicking ass and taking names on the T side. So he's
literally a CT meta, by the way. There was one player out of 10 who was positive on the T side.
What are you doing?
Over 5 maps, that's mental. Think about that. What a CT meta that is, fucking hell.
It's amazing. This FaZe team just seems to be clicking in every way. It seems like you never see there's any weird looks, there's any pressure or anything like that, or like you're never getting any of the dirty glances that you can see in pressure moments where something.
Dude, this is another reason
with how close the second and the third map finished, where you could have had two opportunities where you could have ended it. It could have been 3-0 for FaZe if the clutch goes differently. And you don't see that phase. You don't see that phase in them. You see that they seem unrattled by it. They come right back into it and get to work on Mirage on the 4th map as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't even, you know, as if that it couldn't be the case that they could be up 3-0 and hoisting the trophy then. So they've shown true class. They've shown real talent in this team right now. And it really seems like they're coming together and gelling as a team.
That's why I think they're the number one team, though. Because here's the thing. Na'Vi can shoot anyone out of the server. Like, they can be number 1, 2, and they're certainly still in the mix. But the difference with FaZe, and this is actually a quality that you only get in, like, all-time great teams. It's like you're saying, dude, they are the craziest doing the reset. They can even reset in the same game, hence the comebacks they do. Like, as you're saying, what's crazy is they almost have that like perfect chemistry that you have, where, you know, in the great teams, what you sort of want is that people, I know this sounds weird, but when it goes bad for you in the game is when you make it lighthearted and you just roll with it. And you're like, who fucking cares? And you make it like a joke. But then when it's the moment when you get serious, like that's really hard. That balance is super tough to do. Like, there's teams who can do the lighthearted thing the whole time, but that also usually means they're not sort of like as fucking killer instinct. They don't win the game as often. often. And there's teams that can be serious all the time, but then obviously the problem then becomes, I even thought Prime Astralis did this, dude. When Prime Astralis fell off their game and attended all those blasts, they started like raging when they were losing. You remember they were like punching tables and monitors. Like that wasn't people just rolling with the punches. They were a team that was only, they only had one mode, and it was we're super serious. And so as a result, we're super serious about losing. The thing about FaZe is, they somehow like culturally within the team, they can sort of like, it's like they reduce the impact of getting a body blow from the opponent or losing a half, or like, dude, they've got to be the ultimate team at losing the big round, like lose a massive clutch where you almost win and then they just come right back and win anyway. I'm really impressed with the fortitude of this side, especially because that's exactly what people tried to pin on Carrigan from the old FaZe, the Nico Guardian one. They tried to pin on him the idea that he was going to always be a choker and that he couldn't sort of make use of these guys, and that if he got a bit uncomfortable, he's going to lose. It was a bit of the old Astralis. Carrigan, he's the choker still. That doesn't exist in this team anymore. In fact, again, you even saw in this final, Carrigan makes ballsy players too. He doesn't just sit back and let them kill everyone. He makes fucking plays himself.
He shut down Inferno in that grand final. Like,
for sure.
The one who ended it there. Like it's like one thing that I took away, and I was just kind of confirming it as well, taking a quick glance at the stats, is just the impression that I had in the finals is that there's just solid fundamentals on FaZe, because they've killed their egos, right? It doesn't really seem like anybody's just trying to be the star or anything. It really feels like when you watch them play and interact with each other, they're teammates. And when they play on the server, when I was watching, the one thing that I took away was that they always seem to trade each other. It's the buddy system.
Oh, they're really good at that.
It's the buddy system in full effect, in full display. One guy goes down, boom, somebody's immediately there just trading that kill. It's not, and also no hesitation. It's like somebody's got to run in. That guy's running in first. He's drawing the fire. And then the other guys, the second guy and the third guy, like it feels like when I watch FaZe, it's not some guy who's just like trying to make big plays happen. It just feels like I'm watching really solid fundamental CS where they're moving together as a unit. If somebody needs to run out, that person's running out. There's no hesitation. Or if somebody gets picked, bam, his teammate is immediately reacting and picking up the slack. And they went up a few percentage points on their traded, by the end of the tournament. I think going into it was like 19 and they finished at 21 too. So like, so it feels like that kind of like gets backed up a little bit just after that grand finals, that impression that they're really doing really snappy and really good at trading the kills and making sure that they're working together as a unit. It feels like the stats kind of bear it out as well. So that's really cool to see, because I like that kind of CS. There's something about the stars that is always going to be, highlight. Everybody loves a highlight reel. Everybody loves a Modesty pop it off or a Simple or whatever. It's awesome. It's cool to see. Twist had his moments for sure in this grand finals. But what I love more, and this is why I've always loved those structured teams in the past, is I like solid fundamental CS. I like guys who, do trade, who play without ego and who trade, no hesitation, who go in with the buddy system. That's why I always bring it up in cast. It's like, this is the buddy system. This is them at work. One guy peaks, one guy swings, you're always working together. And so when you get those really solid duos together and they start working together and it starts panning out, it's just really sick to see. And I feel like FaZe have really got that going for them right now. So it's exciting. It's exciting because that's something. You're not just trying to hope that you're going to keep being able to ride this one player's high, like Movie Star Riders semifinal against FaZe. It was just, there was no like some pious who was going to have like this crazy performance, or deaths, or Mopaz with this crazy opening percentage going in, into that semifinal. It felt like he could, just not miss an opening shot. All those individuals dropped off and then the team wasn't there to pick it up again, right? Whereas with FaZe, it's like an individual can drop off a little bit, doesn't matter. You still got that.
I'll give you the example. Like, because I've always said since they formed this team, the reason why I even thought on paper it made sense is exactly because no one has to be a superstar and carry every game.
Yeah.
The joke is no one could know that Rain would perform like this. So if you add him in, they've got 4 players doing that, then that's just OP as fuck, isn't it? So as people, this final here shows exactly what we're talking about. Because remember, the last player to join this team that completed them was Rops, right? And when he joined in very similar fashion to how Nico joined FaZe all those years ago. You come from Mouse Sports as a lesser team, you join the top team, and you're going to go to the top of the world. The difference is they haven't needed Rops to be like Nico. Rops just has to do a job within the team, because they really do collectively between. Well, here's what's genius. I'll probably do a video on it soon. It's like they've got a superstar, but it is just like they've divided up the stats. Like, so you've got like the crazy aim, like Twists can just get kills no one else can get. So you've got like an element like that, but you just have to do much else. You have like Brokey, just do like mid-round AWP, basically. We've got that nailed now. You've got fucking Rain that has all these insane CT spots he can play that are just absurdly efficient compared to anyone else. Then you have fucking, who's the other one I haven't done? Oh, Rops is the other player. And like I say, he was
even quiet in the
He was quite
finals.
underwhelming. Yeah, he actually had a few
quiet
maps
in the grand finals.
but it didn't matter. He did just enough, and then the rest of the team carried him through, quite frankly. So that's all you need to know. That on Navi's side, we're talking about Symbol didn't do quite well enough, and they almost won. Robs didn't even have to do that well, and they did win. That's what's great. They did win. They won the tournament, for fuck's sake. And there's how you know also, Semler, that they have a really good vibe in the team. Because even though, like, it's not like people criticize Robs, obviously the team won, but I saw some people were pointing out, like, where is Robs? If you notice, Twists went out of his way to sort of say something, I can't remember an interview on Twitter, that, like, actually people sort of can't see what Robs was in the team. He did that thing where you sort of play defense and imply like he was doing something in the game that just didn't show up on the scoreboard or something, you know. Sure. I don't really know that I believe it. It sounds more just like, I like my teammate, please don't flame him because we won the tournament. But I could also believe there's something to that, like that the vibe in this team is almost like, because it's not that you're absolutely must carry, it's like, just do your job, just do what we ask, and then if the result's the result, the team you can take the plus and minus.
Well, it's a bit of a throwback, but you do remember do you remember Nip back in the day, the heyday, you know, where it's like Fifth got flamed day in, day out, no matter what, but like the whole team came around him. Like they were also a team in the sense that like didn't matter. They were there. They were always like just trying to protect him from the social media just because he was doing his job. He was doing the job that they asked of him. And you know, it's fair enough. That was how the team was functioning, and it was them against the world. You could have that same kind of vibe here as well with FaZe, where it feels like it's the team exactly doing it together. There's no like divisiveness that you can see.
No, what you do is you just sit them down and go, look, not everyone can carry in the server. Only so many people can be world class. So all you've got to do is just do some things to make up for what other people aren't doing. Like, for example, for Flaren, you know, if I wanted some water or my bag hadn't been taken there, maybe you do that. Maybe that's like the hidden thing you do. Whatever, you get the joke.
There it is. Yeah. I was going to let you.
No, it's all right. It's all good. It's all good. But, you know, on the joke, other joke is he's just the one that counts the money. Then he's like, yep, that's 14,000, Mr. Heaton. Like,
there you go to get right.
Then Heaton's like,
then it went through the NIP organization, exactly. And then it was never seen again.
No, he goes, it's all right. I'll just put this into the NIP accounting system, and you'll get it real soon. Like, the joke is in the NIP system, it's like that's not even scanned. Like, isn't that like a shredder? No, what are you talking about? Shredded all their money and just took it out of the back. It may as well have been. That's what they may as well be doing, right? I know, NIP.
All right. Well,
being as there are no CS tournaments at the moment, so I can't place a bet for you or recommend a team that I think's an underdog or a good favourite to bet on. How about instead I just let you know about a free competition they're running on the Esports Bet website, which is the World's Prediction Series 2 competition. It did include CSGO tournaments when they were running and will again when they return in August. It has all the other games as well. There is a 10 million USDT prize pool, hundreds of thousands of USDT to be won as individual prizes. It is free to enter on the website. They give you some DJT to play with. You can get more DJT by logging in each day and also by messaging the mod mail on the Discord, discord.gg/esportsbet will get you to that server. You message the mod mail there, they'll give you some DJT, and you just basically place bets with this currency. If you get high up on the leaderboard, you could potentially be eligible to win millions of dollars, but in this particular case, hundreds of thousands per person. And like I say, it goes across all the esports games, so you can really test out your predictive powers. I know I've been doing a pretty good job in CSGO recently. I've had a whole bunch of big playoffs for the major, and Cologne, where I've gotten pretty much almost every result right, including the finals. How are you doing? And do you think you could do well in the World's Prediction Series 2 contest? Well, it's free to enter.
So I've just got like a hodgepodge of different stuff. I mean,
go on, then just pick one out.
That us talking about NIP was just kind of got me on the speculation of where's Device. I'm like, what's going on with Device? Because it is kind of like what Kassad talked about. I mean,
let's do it then, because obviously
just go into this Kassad. Like,
listen, Trace, the coach of Astralis, said there will be no changes, so that actually implies that my news from the major is not going to happen. So we can talk about. Let's do it now.
Let's just go into it. Let's just go into it.
It's rolling anyways. Keep going.
Because so we're rolling. All right. So like I mentioned the Kassad, like I mentioned Kassad, you know, talking about how some of these orgs function at the beginning of the show, right? And so this is in Snakes and Banners with your show with Maui, and go catch the VOD. That was a banger if you've missed it. But like one of the points that he was making was just orgs wasting money, orgs just burning money. And one point that he really hammered home was when orgs have players on the bench. And so this is all convoluted. This is all going to come together. We're just talking about NIP good. And NIP shredding money literally, but that was back in the day, guys. That was back in like 2013, you know, somewhere around there where it was a little bit foggy as to what was actually happening in the NIP system. Fast forward to today, where one of the biggest player purchases, you know, in CSGO history goes down. NIP make a massive deal out of it. They act like they're bringing in the Messiah, like he's going to save the team, and this is going to be the future of it. They spend mucho dinero buying him off of Astralis, And then he promptly disappears, and we haven't heard a word of him since.
Yep.
For
and by the way he
almost 6
left
months now
was really weird. Like, if people don't remember, because this is the detail people forget, Semler, he left mid-tournament. They were playing IEM Winter. The team had made it, I think, either the quarters or the semis. I think it maybe made it to the semis, and he just left the tournament at that point in time. They said he was ill or something, he was going through like anxiety or something. He just left. In came, I think it was the Forzy guy who came in again to replace him. I actually think they won the match off the top of my head over G2, and they lost to Vitality in the final. Like, what's ridiculous is he left like that. And then afterwards it was announced that, he's taking time off. But then all that happened was there was never a time limit placed on how long. It was just, I'm taking some time off for this reason. And then he just came out because there was initial speculation. Then we're talking about end of last year. There was speculation then maybe because someone said like he's bought a place in Copenhagen again. So the speculation then was maybe he goes back to Astralis. So to combat that, he came out with that tweet longer or whatever, where he sort of said like essentially like it is like a mental health thing or whatever, or like don't speculate, I don't know when I'm going to be back or whatever the fuck. But the problem is, Semler, it's just too long now. Like, remember, we're in July now, guys. That what I'm talking about happened in like I think mid-December. This is over half a year. Now, there's a few points to be made here, mate, because there's a lot that I think a lot of fans are missing out on, which is like, one, even if Device somehow has like not a great contract, which would surprise me, mate. If I had to guess, bearing in mind he got a very recent contract and he suppose he has a whole agency rep with him, I would imagine he's on the guaranteed money contract, mate, where you get nearly all your salary anyway, whether you play or not. Which by the way, if so, actually does demand we ask the question, should he be sitting out and just spending someone else's money? That's a real question you have to ask.
That is a real question.
Because the other side is, if fans don't know, normally the old, more exploitative contracts you give to a random player, like if you join Fnatic tomorrow and you were nobody, they'll give you like a bog standard contract. It'll probably say, if we bench you, you get, say, half the salary or a quarter of your salary, and that's like a little bit you get, but you obviously don't get the full amount. Now, the reason I bring this up is because even if he was on his half salary or something, he's still got a lot of fucking money now without playing that you're spending if you nip. And you're not getting any value out of him. Like, by the way, here's an element I find very weird that no one's discussing, right? If he never plays for Nip again and he goes to the end of his contract, he has absolutely fucked Nip, mate. Because in the modern climate, if I know you're going to leave in 6 months, I need to sell you now so I can make some money. That way you can go to your team. They can pay me, say, 200, 300K. I can recoup a little bit of money. I use that to buy my next guy, whoever that might be. And then we all keep going on. The band marches on, doesn't it? If you don't do that, then not only have I paid you all this salary essentially for nothing, at the end of it, you go for free to my rival, another team in my region anyway. And then the bigger part for me, I brought this up and no one else seems to get it, is, dude, they haven't even used him in marketing during this downtime. Like, I know fans were good, but he's benched. Who cares? It's one of the most popular Counter-Strike players of all time. If I get a 4-time major winner in my team, even if he was on the bench, like I benched him, I'll be marketing the fuck out of that guy. Dude, it's Device. You could have done so much amazing campaigns, things. In fact, I'd have even told him that, Semler. I'd have said, look, if you're going to sit out and not play the matches, I'll let you do that. But at least do some fucking like side shit for me. Do like a documentary or an interview or something. Find something that we can do where you can sort of justify some of the money we're paying you. Because this is going to end on a really bad note, I get the feeling, Semler. If he really runs this contract to the end, unless he just full on retires and never plays CSGO again, I would feel bitter if I was Nip. If I was the Nip teammates, I'd feel like, what was that? Like, what, you just left for like 8 months and then you never told me if you ever come in. Like,
far.
I think it's
too far gone. Like, he's still on the website. They have blacked him out at least, or like grayscaled him, saying waiting for your return. But if you mouse over on the teams section of he's still there alongside Rez, as like the CSGO team. Like, he's still actively there. So, but I mean, I think it's gone too far. I think it's too far gone now. Like, this is seriously damaging to Nip, because it is not only. I mean, it makes the management almost look incompetent as well. From an outside looking in perspective, if you saw like, oh, we're doing the press release, we're announcing like we're going to pick up this star player who's going to be the flagship guy who's going to really steer us forward into the future. We can build around him. He's going to be it. And then it all just falls apart within a couple of months. It's a ridiculous turn of events.
I will say there is sort of a little bit of karmic justice, Semler, in the idea that it will now be a player who fucks over NIP, nicks all their money and gives them fuck all in return. Like, well, you know what, Nip? What's good for the goose?
Yeah, we need to check some of those old players. The big transfers get right. What does this transfer to a bank account in Copenhagen get right? Nothing.
But that's what it was basically, Semler. This never was actually a real team. What happened was Device decided, like, I'm going to retire. fire anyway, but it was his friends we get right. He was like one last job. And he came back and he's just gotten all that money. He's got like about €1 million worth for all the United. He's like, there you go, Freiburg. There you go, Forest. They got your money, boys.
All the royalties.
There you go.
The king of banana. The king of banana. What was it? Ice cream that Freiburg never got any royalties for.
Oh, by the way, there's a little bit detail. By the way, here's what's great. We can actually also say things on this show. It's one of the things I love about this show. You can get info into the community that isn't known. So I'll give you a piece of info that I can now tell you because Freiburg had no problem with this. Although, by the way, as the random aside, his name isn't Freiburg. It's like Free Bear, isn't it? But like, whatever. We're never going to fucking turn that corner. So rewind that. Freiburg. Adam Freiburg. So Freiburg, anyway, if you remember back in the day, because he was the king of banana, they had that stupid thing where they were like, it's nip ice cream, it's banana and chocolate, whatever. I never understood, by the way, why the chocolate part. Like, is that because he shits the bed? So I don't know. Why chocolate? Banana, I get. But anyway, put that to one side. So you have this flavor ice cream. Well, if you want to know just to what level of country NIP the org was in, when we did one of those, it was for a different betting company. Obviously, we did one of those. You remember we did like the little profiles that were almost like the major profiles for Flashpoint. You remember we like sent teams out. We did one around Freiburg, right? And what people might not know is he even said we just couldn't in the end include this in the actual doc because guess what? I think we had to like get Nip to sign off on some footage we'd used, and they were like, we won't do it unless you remove this. So we like removed the fucking clip. But there was a clip where he just even said, just to sort of make an exclamation point on the Nip org. He said, like, I didn't even get any money for that ice cream. They got nothing for that. He just promoted like an ice cream for nothing. What the fuck? What?
It was just, I mean, the shirts, the branding, all of it around it. Like,
it's egregious, isn't it? So that's why I say, if I take a wider enough perspective, they were due to get absolutely fucked eventually, similar anyways. So, you know, in that sense, I won't shed tears for the Nip org. It's the players I care about. That's why, as I say, what I care about is this. If you were those players, like that's why I personally hope, and I get the sense from the interviews, I get the sense they do know he's not coming back to. Like that's why I think they started making those comments even in the interviews. Like at the major, Hampus said something like, "I think this is the 5-man lineup," or whatever. Like you never say that if there was a real chance. Because here's the reason why I'm glad they're saying that. It would be actually a tragedy, in my opinion, if these players really believed any minute Device can walk back in. Like, especially if you were like Brolan. Bro, like, if I signed to this team, I'm thinking, wait, me and you, Device, dude, we could go to the top. This could be it. Like, we could win the major. If I find out you never come back, like, you're actually, like, putting my livelihood in danger now, mate. Because the problem with all this topic, Sam, it's why... Spoiler, I think players will start doing this more. It's going to be the ultimate get out of jail free card. You just say, I'm having mental health problems, and that gets you your free time off. But this is the problem I have. How long does that last? Because in my opinion, there has to be like a shit or get off the pot moment. And so I think it's something like, I'll give a rough, obviously it's not going to apply to all cases. I'm giving a rough guide here. I would say after like 3 months, if after 3 months you still cannot play active CS, there should be something like you agree that now you are like permanently benched, or like you are not going to. You essentially tell people I'm not coming back. You can't just leave people in limbo for 3 to 8 to whatever.
Well,
that can't happen.
Where,
you can't run a team like that.
Element of it as well. I don't think that you're trying to pull this kind of card in the CIS region or whatever, and they're just going to laugh you out.
They'll just fire you, mate. They will just fire you.
Like, all right, bye.
Yes.
Whereas, in Scandinavia, it was the first time that I'd heard that, where like I'd heard of somebody, an acquaintance, who had that exact thing, burnout, whatever you want to call it, but they were on sick leave due to stress. And I'm like, American me, coming into Sweden, really like, sick leave due to stress, like, and you're getting paid and yeah, they're paying my salary and everything. I was just like, how long has this been going on? Oh, I've been out for like 6 months. So I'm just sitting here going like, so this is like there's all sorts of safety nets in Scandinavia, and like how the employers and the companies and all that sort of interacts. So the only thing that I can assume is that there's no way that they're employees, and so they have to be contract. It has to be they have to be contractors with there has to be some like weird Swedish law that's going on here, is what I'm saying. That's protecting Device in his relationship with Nip, because I think in any other world, if it comes to competition like this, Nip kick him after 2 months and say, right, goodbye. But there has to be some kind of Swedish law, something that's keeping him from being able to just be like, bye. Now, there's no way that he comes back. I don't think if you're a teammate, you can even look him in the eye at that point. And also, I mean, I don't know how you look anybody in the face if you're Device at that point. If it's been like a real mental health issue, then fine, fair enough. It's a real mental health issue. And like, okay, But if you've been leading them on at all, it's just like, oh, I want to go back to Astralis, but I can't make that happen.
Oh, if any of this was for negotiation, yeah, it's
exactly.
Then,
if any of this was for a business perspective
Great.
of like, well, I don't want to be on this team anymore. I'm back in Copenhagen, and I want to go play with somebody else, but nobody wants to pay my buyout because Nip happened to spend $1 million to get me off of Astralis, so they need to get that money back, and nobody else wants to spend that money. If it's at all tied to that, dude.
And by the way,
I hope Nip can sue at that point. Like, I hope there's some
before any fan does what they're going to do, because this even happened actually during the case of Glaive and Zipnik's taking that time off back in 2020. So at the time, Casper had tried to even imply that like me and Richard were like disrespecting them by speculating about their mental health. Whereas what we actually did was make these points here. Because if people don't know, in 2020, when those players took the time off, that was part of why they did it, Samler. Part of why they did it was to potentially negotiate separately. Like if people don't know, there was a real world where not only the entire team could have been sold, like famously they could have been sold to Cloud9, but like Zipnik's could have been on the Henry G Cloud9, like that all could have happened. Like these things were like essentially even though they said I'm leaving because I need time off, like they just might have never returned if certain deals had happened. That just didn't end up being the way it played out. So fans don't really know in public. So that's why I said earlier, the danger here is this: it goes hand in hand because it's such a serious topic, and crucially, you can't from the outside know if it's true or not. You have to just trust the person or an expert. That's why it will be abused, Samler, because it's the ultimate shield. Because if you say how can someone come out if they don't know and go, you don't have it? Like we can't know that. We have to assume they do, and unless they're shown to be a liar, basically.
Well, what was the death of Me Too right now, basically with Amber Heard and all of that, right? Where it's just like it just gets put. If somebody starts abusing it, there's going to be more people who are going to be willing to abuse it down the line. So absolutely, talked about, right? Because there definitely were like when Me Too kicked off, Weinstein and all that shit. Yeah, fine, fair enough. There were some fucked up things that needed to come out into the open so that it could be addressed and we could move on. But then, of course, it can get taken advantage of. And as soon as it starts getting taken advantage of in that manner, where like Heard comes along just fabricating shit and all that, it's gone too far and it can be completely abused. And now you're going to have the nobody's going to be able to use that again because it's been discredited, if that makes sense, right? Like you're
there's a joke I have to tell you because it is good.
Oh, shit,
it is a good one. No, don't worry.
Real quick, I'm going to tie this up. Because it's the same thing here, right? If players start, if they want to use like a stress or, hey, I'm stressed out and I need a break. If they're going to start using that as a negotiation strategy, then it's all going to fall apart from there. No player in the future is going to be able to call that in good faith because no team is going to be able to trust them and the public aren't going to be able to.
We're going to have to be cynical, of course.
We have to be cynical because that's just the way things are. Okay, now let's hear your joke.
That's why, by the way, in the future, the difference is now you can just do it because they might give you time. In the future, it'll be like Zipnik. You'll have to just have a doctor's note. That'll just be what it'll be.
Exactly. Yeah.
If people keep abusing it, that'll just have to be what it is at that point in time. Like the joke was this, it's a slightly edgy one, but it's a good one because it's just a semantic joke, isn't it? So if you don't know the joke here, it's going to actually confuse Europeans, but if you're American, you'll get the joke. And if you're European, don't worry about it. It's not like a great joke anyway. Basically, the joke was like this. He was like, when they started that movement, I thought, how inappropriate. Someone's told their story about what's happened to them and you think it's appropriate to do a pound Me Too. How inappropriate. It's because in America they call bizarrely that hash sign the pound sign for some reason. It's just a joke about the semantics, really, but it's a good one. It's banging in it, I know.
It's good.
It's banging. Whatever, I know.
That's a solid one, dude. Good shit. Well, that kind of just leaves us wondering, man. I mean, that's the thing, and it just the reason why it's still an interesting topic is that everybody's wondering. Like every morning in my stream, I get asked at least once.
This is what I hate about this, Samuel, is I just hate every aspect of it. Like, I'll give you an example. Even if your device yourself, let's imagine, right? Because like I say, if we're assuming he one day would like to play professional CS again, right? The assumption right now, despite the fact we can talk about it in a second, the assumption is he wants to go back to Astralis because it's the place he knows and he can be in Denmark. Yeah. Even if that's true, that in itself, this is what I hate about this move. It's like device. Do you not know what sports are, mate? Because I made this point when he joined NIP because he'd been basically in the same team org, like not the same org, but like the same team in different orgs for the whole of his career. He's never really played the market. He's never been a guy who's moved between teams, right? This guy, if he just goes back to Astralis, he will now have twice fucked up the two most potentially beneficial movement periods of his entire career. Like Dude, when he went to Nip, I mean, we now found out apparently was just for that fucking girlfriend to live in Stockholm. These are the dumbest reasons ever to change your career. Like in that scenario, I made the point at the time that at that time, bearing in mind he speaks English, he is the best fucking like traditional AWPA in the world, and everyone would want him in their team. He could have gone to any team he wanted. He could have been in G2 when equal, could have been in FaZe winning the major. Same thing now. Like, why now does he have to go to Australia? It's like, look, pick it as an option. But if you really are going to go back, again, just let people behind the scenes know. Let's actually have bidding. Like maybe Vitality wants, I'm picking random names out here. Maybe some of these teams want to like it'd be so stupid to end your career and just go, well, I went to Nip because my girlfriend was there. Then I went to Astralis because I went to live in Denmark. These are shit reasons when you're one of the greatest players of all time. Like you could still do some big things on the way out the door these last few years. This could be like a renaissance. It doesn't have to end after 1 year or whatever.
Where would you put him right now? Like just off the top of your head, like if
I could position him in a team, I'll put him in a squad tomorrow.
No, but like put him onto a team. Like which team would you go?
I'm trying to think what I would pick. Let me think.
It's like fucking with FaZe now feels almost.
The problem is here's the issue. Obviously, I think Device is a better AWPer than Brokey, but as you say, the issue is this: when a team shows chemistry like FaZe has, you don't change anything until they stop winning. Like you just keep ride it out. So the problem I have is this. Right. Obviously, G2 won't want him because they paid 600k for Monacy, but like Device is Device, man. I would still do that if I could. The problem with the Vitality one is they've got Z, who obviously said out they're going to be in the market for an AWPer.
Yeah.
I mean, another obvious one to me would have been Team Liquid, but who the fuck knows? Maybe they're not into that. Who knows? I don't get that one myself. That's the problem. The stupid thing about it is this, Sebler. A really high level tier 1 AWPer who speaks English is about the most eligible transfer in the entire world of CS. Think about all the international teams that want that player. OG would have wanted it until they got Dexter. ENCE has Hades, but they just don't have any fucking money for Device. Like, there's a million teams this guy could go to. The joke is, as much as everyone thinks it's obvious he should go to Astralis, it isn't actually. Astralis wouldn't be number one with Device, I don't think. I actually don't know if he should go back to Astralis. I feel like at the moment, he's of more value to Astralis than Astralis is to Device, if you know what I mean.
100%. I mean, there's no question that.
I mean, the dream would obviously put him on Heroic.
Astralis.
How about that? That'd be interesting.
That's interesting, but then who calls? Because that you're Heroic, it's KD.
Make KD a rifler.
Oh, make KD a rifler and let him take over. Okay.
Because think about it. Here's what you've never had in that team. Because KD was never a dominant AWPer, you've never actually got that much from the AWP in that team. Now imagine in that team instead, because KD is going to be a bit less impactful as a rifler, but you have Stown and Device. Dude, you got a nice 1-2 punch there. That's fucking fire.
Yeah, that could actually be Street Fire.
And I think he'd love the team. It's tactical CS, mate. I think he'd like that style of play.
He's in Copenhagen.
The downside is, unfortunately, this is where Heroic didn't. I think Heroic never won the lands, unfortunately. So even though to us they're above Astralis and they went above, I don't think people like Device necessarily think that. Like, I think actually the Astralis players are sort of like, yeah, whatever, who gives a fuck about Heroic? Like, I don't think they sort of vibe with them as much. So I don't think he would go there, unfortunately.
I think it's like in his mind, it might be beneath him.
Yeah, that's also, what I think.
If you were to put like the attractive thought about, the attractive thought about Device returning to Astralis is that then you have Blame F, you have Config, and you have Device.
You've got something, yeah, sure.
That's a pretty scary trio. If those guys are all firing on all cylinders, I mean, Blame F is
be good.
Config is still shaky since the wrist surgery. It sucks to say, but he's not consistent. But then if you put Device in there, all of a sudden that's taking some pressure off of Config, and maybe that reduction in pressure means that Config is able to step up, and all of a sudden you got two excellent riflers and an AWPer. That could be some really sick. I mean, you kind of do have to break this narrative, because right now the way that it looks with Astralis and the struggling that's going on there, well, it's actually. I mean, it's not like Vitality are exactly knocking it out of the park either, are they? So the whole idea of, like who was actually calling it, was it Glaver, Zonic, who was the master behind the whole thing, yeah, right? But it's not like Vitality are really, crushing it either. They're kind of on the struggle bus.
Oh, here's the thing to say though, because obviously the topic, let's discuss it now. Basically, Trace, the coach of Astralis now, after this Cologne event, he has said, it was the title of the interview, there will be no changes, basically. Now, the reason that is shocking is because, first of all, as on this show, but when Richard was on it a while back around the major, I revealed that I heard from a very legit source that actually Device and Valde were going to go back to Astralis. And it was even implied to me, if you think of the timing it was at the major, that it would be this period when they do it, because you do it so you could have the run up to the next major, right? As you'd expect. Well, instead, we're having this weird messaging where they're saying there's going to be no changes, and because they've just finished top 4 at Cologne, well, you have to understand, Samler, they're number 5 in the HLTV rankings now. This is exactly where you get trapped if you're a team, because that sounds like What do you mean, bro? We were just top 4, one of the biggest events of the year. We're number 5. Yeah, here's the thing. You're that in the weakest period. Like right now is when all those teams were talking about G2, Vitality, Liquid. They're all in a shit place. VP destroyed, turns them outsiders. Cloud9, dodgy as fuck. Ends dropping off, probably going to lose Spinks. Like right now is basically the easiest time to nick that spot. Like you saw from their run, they didn't have to beat all these monster teams to get there. They beat a couple of okay squads. A few teams underperformed. There's a lot of upsets and they somehow wound up top 4. The difference is that top 4 isn't replicable. Like that, if this was tennis, that's the best analogy to use to think about this way, Samler. If people don't know, the way tennis system works is very fascinating. What they do is when you win points for a tournament, the tennis point system is always exactly 1 year. So what they do is this. If you win Wimbledon, right? Let's say you get a random amount, I'll give you about 10,000 points for Wimbledon. That means next year at Wimbledon, you're defending those 10,000 points because at the end of Wimbledon, you'll have lost the points and you'll get whatever you get for that Wimbledon. So what it means is when you have an overperformance, you actually know when the guy will drop off next because when it comes to that next tournament, he's not going to get as high. So similarly, if you just wait 3 months, Astralis ain't going to be 5th in the world. They're going to go like to 10th and then they're probably going to be 13th. Like that's the problem. This squad doesn't actually, with this lineup, in my opinion, have potential. They've played with this lineup for a while now. We're actually seeing, in my opinion, like the limits of what this team can do. They're all right. They're not terrible. They're all right. And as we said, like Blame F is really good, Comfy can be good, but they're not going to win tournaments. Like this team, there's no work, like there's no bracket they could have even gotten here somewhere. Like even if somehow they beat FAs, they weren't going to beat Navi. So like, you know what I mean? Like there's no world they're winning. So if I were them, I wouldn't be doing what they currently claim they're doing, which is sticking with the same squad. I actually think they do need like at least one big change.
I think the issue is, and I'm just double checking this real quick, is that I just think, like when we talk about the speculation of like making plays to pick up bigger players, Device comes with a price tag attached, and Valda, I'm pretty sure, comes with a price tag attached.
Oh, it does, yeah.
He's on OG. The OG aren't going to give him up for free. Yep. And Device, I mean, we're talking about one of the biggest buyouts in CS history. It's not like NIP are going to give him away for free either. There was even speculation that Device was willing to put up a part of the buyout or something like that to try and make it happen. Dude, have you not heard that?
When do the fucking tales of cockery end? Like, so now you're going to pay your own buyout as well to go back to the same team. Fuck it, when you get there, give them a disc. Why don't you pay Nicola Nyholm to play on Astralis? Like, what's going on here? This is mental. How wretched can one guy get? Like, and there's a final detail I'd just like to announce. I took all my NIP salary in Luna. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, how much worse does it get for this guy? I know, like, I'm trying to figure out more ways he gets fucked by the world. Like, I don't know.
Dude. Brutal. Why am I laughing so hard?
I know it shouldn't be that funny, but it is.
This is some Great Depression, chucking yourself out of a window is because you're a stockbroker and you lost everything.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Speaking of stocks, the reason why I don't think that Astralis are going to do it is simply because their stock is worth less than half of what it was at this point last year, and even then it was already on a free fall. So, like, I don't know what's keeping the doors open.
I personally think as a team in general, Semler, that's why the Device story actually pisses me off as well. Because it's the only scenario in which they could get a potential world-class player that would want to join their team. It's the only one. All the other ones wouldn't. So the reason why it annoys me is because Astralis, the org, I've always said this, I've been waiting for this period. I was waiting for when the classic lineup broke up because the Astralis org has tried to sell you a narrative that they made that narrative. They made that team and they're the reason the team was successful. And I knew, well, that's obviously not true. So I said, I can't wait till they just get some all right players like this. Like, it's not like Farley's shit. He's just an all right Danish player. And guess what? If you give a bunch of all right players and a few good ones to Astralis, they didn't build that fucking amazing team. They already got that core from before. They made like one or two changes. So and they don't have Zonic, who they themselves, in theory, gave the power to make those changes. So Astralis isn't supposed to be a top org if people don't get it. I don't think people even get it. Like, as an esports org, they're not enormous. Like, there's loads of orgs that aren't even in CSGO, Samler, that fans from CSGO wouldn't get it, are way bigger. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, you know, like the fucking Optic or Envy or something, they're way bigger than Astralis is, for fuck's sake. Like, Astralis is, at this point in time, just survives off the odd CSGO run and having an LEC spot, not even having a good team, just having an LEC spot. That's about all they've got in esports. Like, they've got fuck all. So I actually think, quite frankly, it sucks because, as you've seen, they are not a team that's shown any commitment to spend money. Like, as you're saying, we don't even know if they'll buy out Valde. Maybe it's too much for them. Maybe I don't want to pay
they have the funds.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to. And as you're saying, if they don't have fuck up, like obviously they've made the stock play, it didn't work out. They've had a few rounds of VC, etc. Like they aren't a team with unlimited money like the others do. People don't realize people like EG can waste money in ways people like Astralis cannot. You know,
that is actually like the topic now. I think that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked into a bit more, because then it involves like actually trying to figure out like who owns what, because it's so interconnected. It gets really fuzzy. But like, just how much money do these teams really have to play with, right? And are they going to be able to keep inflating salaries, keep inflating buyouts? Because let's be straight, as far as CSGO is concerned, the only teams, like, it was a meme, and I'm surprised at how it got laughed at so hard when Copenhagen Flames announced that they were profitable for last year, right? And it was like $6,500 or something like that, and everybody was like, "Whoa, $6,000." I'm like, guys, in esports, everybody else is like 10 million, $12 million in the red, like fucking bleeding money. They're never going to see that money come back at any point in time. They're just hemorrhaging fucking investor money. And these guys are over here trying to figure it out. Same as ENCE, same, like there's BME. There's a few companies that are in the space that are really trying to just grow it. Like they grow it year on year, only profit, and really just try and grow the thing. And so it's like, you got guys like that, but then, yeah, you have the others where it's just like, they are hemorrhaging money, but they have so much of it because they've managed to swindle. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like they just managed to swindle these investors to get them to just dump tens of millions of dollars into their companies. And so they're just like playing with house money or something, like funny money to them. It's not a real number anymore. Like, that's the thing. It's just not a real number. You get the impression they're like, "Oh yeah, that salary, fine, let's do it. Just roll with it. It doesn't matter." I was like, this doesn't make sense. This is crazy. Like, how do you continue to have a scene when like half of the scene are like playing with hacks? They're playing with cheat codes. It's like, how do you continue to have a scene that when it's that sort of scenario? I don't get it. Like, to me, that's just like the truly amazing thing that ENCE, for example, are able to come in, consistently grow year on year, just by getting sponsorships in, selling merch, building a brand, building all that, following that community, and then actually have a team that is able to compete in these events. It just blows my mind when you've got the likes of G2 and
they might be about to get Fox, because that was another piece of news, right? They might be about to lose Spinks.
We can go into that. I mean,
you can do that too.
It feels like they may actually start to get gutted now, which is kind of like their fate. I don't know. What do you think? Like, it feels like that's the fate of those teams.
Yeah. Here's the thing. But this is one of the areas.
Sorry, hold on, real quick.
Yeah,
that's how this is supposed to work, though. Copenhagen Flames make a profit because they sold players. They were one of the only teams, because in CSGO, to actually be making a profit is because they sold players, they sold teams, and that's how you make money in CSGO. Really?
Oh, if you're ENCE,
fucking massive.
The sad thing is, in business sense, you want to do this move because Vitality is one of the few teams can pay over the odds. You can get a nice chunk of change with that money. Look, there's no Spinks to go and buy. You can't get a replacement because he was like absurdly good, but you can get the next player. You can go and get another good player. You use that money you paid here to pay his salary, pay a little buyout, like maybe you have to pay a 50, 20K buyout to a smaller org. You get another player in and you hope you're good. The downside obviously is it was Spinks. Like, that is a one out of nowhere nut player that came along, and you're not going to have a replacement for him. So you're not going to be as good. But the issue is, as you alluded to, if you notice, the whole time ENCE got really good, have been stressing this narrative. The question is just, how long do they get to run with this lineup? Because as you say, it was inevitable. If you know the way the business works, you are not going to get a player this good on a team that's supposed to be a small squad without much money and keep him for a long time. Like, it wouldn't even be fair to Spinks if you really think about it. I know as a fan it might seem counterintuitive because this is where he got his break, right? When he was on Contact, he was nobody. Then he came to ENCE with Snappy and he's had his break. Yeah, but think about it, right? Who's helped who more at the moment, right? At the beginning, it was ENCE because they gave him a platform, they gave him a team, they gave him Snappy, they gave him a salary. At this point, it's inarguably Spinks, though, because look what he's helped them do. He made them a top 4 team in the world, top 4 at the major. He himself was one of the best players in the world. He's brought them to a whole bunch of finals. Like, at this point in time, yes, you would like to keep him if you're ENCE, but beggars can't be choosers. As you say, the right thing to do now for everyone is Spinks to move on, because here's what can happen now. ENCE makes a big chunk of money that they were never making before, and they didn't spend much on him. They've only spent his little salary. And then meanwhile, if you're Spinks, you get to go and play potentially for one of the best teams in the world. If you're Spinks, you're like, mate, it was fun being a really good player on an underdog team. I want to play with Zemu and fucking Zonic and win the major and be a champion. So it's actually, and Vitality goes out saying that's potentially a great pickup if they can make the roles work. I think it works for everyone, basically. It had to happen, though. It had to happen.
You have tradesman teams. where it's just like they are going to be there and they're going to be building talent. They're going to have the system. So it's like, if you're talking about how these big teams don't really have any idea of like what it is that they're actually doing, and they're either lucking into a core roster that's already built and then riding that high the way Astralis did, or you're going to have these teams that actually know how to pick talent and actually know how to find the next generation of player and actually know how to build them up. Ents is one of those teams, it seems like, because they just consistently, they keep coming up with these players. They keep finding these players to bring them up. And then you get the big,
well, this ties into a topic you'll be interested in talking about, because I know it's what you wanted to actually address. It's basically, if people don't know, I'm also shrewd with when I bring guests on my shows. I don't just bring them on willy-nilly. The reason I brought Cassard on that show is because I knew behind the scenes that he was, if people don't know, like I think he even implied it on the show, he was supposed to be the EG coach at some point, or he was in the mix for it, and it didn't happen for some weird reason again, probably because they've got dog shit decision making over there, haven't they? Remember, they're the fuckers who saw that Stu 2K line and went, yeah, how many millions? And then later they go, I can't believe this didn't work. Like, shut the fuck up. But anyway, right, so obviously he should have been in EG. So I knew essentially that a bunch of these topics are pissing him off. I know, for example, he doesn't like that G2 story because it implies the players are maybe having some say again. So anyway, if you bring it back a second, right, one of the points I think that is key about this topic right here is the notion that, like, it's not just about who the team signs, how much they spend. It's about that they have to have like an actual structure. And part of the structure is you've got to have a general manager, because one of the points Cassard made was you actually want to be thinking on multiple years like you would in business. Because in the same way as if you make a business, if you don't know, you don't just go, well, I start today and then I sell a good product and I make money eventually. No, you have like a plan, like, right, we're going to do this much in the first 3 months, then we're going to expand in the next 6. And then if things go well, we'll maybe expand beyond that for the next 12. Or if don't go well, we'll reduce things and we'll sort of run for 6 more and we'll see how we go. You have a whole plan and then you adjust it as you go every few months, obviously. Well, his point in terms of the team basically is that no matter what type of team you have, you're going to have like a plan that's like the Device example is the best one. In that scenario, as the GM, what you would have done is this. Device came to you late last year and he goes, I'm not available. So you go, right, I'm going to plan for 3 to 6 months where you don't play and we'll see, do you come back in that time period? Then when I find out you're not coming back, say 3 or 4 months in, I'll sign a player like Brawler and I'll start making. Now I have to ask myself, I'll give myself 3 extra months. You either come back at the end and I can get you in the lineup, or you're gone for good, but I'm only 1 more move away then. And now I sell you to Astralis, I'll bring in the last piece. I've at least kept my part going, even though I didn't know. Well, basically, like these teams are the ones that it is implied, like they need a better GM. Because think in this scenario, that what was the team we're talking about now?
EG right now.
EG, right? That's the best example, right? Why did they ever even sign this team at the beginning? Whoever made that decision at the very beginning and said, this team makes sense, that's already fucked. Because here's the thing, right, Semler? If you notice the track record, who are the guys who are finding the next talents? It isn't me. It isn't some company guy. It's Blade for Navi. It's Saw for Ents. Like, it's the guys with the eye test. Those coaches are the guys who've watched 1 billion hours of CS and they can grade players. Like you saw in that episode there, Cassard had some great suggestions. Like for him, like JKS would be a good signing to Vital. Like he had a bunch of interesting ones where his eye tells you this person would be a good signing, this one wouldn't.
Sure.
What you do essentially is you hire a guy like that to be your GM and then he can tell you who the next player is. Because to actually know from players can't be trusted. They are too emotional. They'll do stuff like, for someone will flame them in a scrim and they'll just say that guy's a bad player, even if he's an amazing player in the world. Like players can't be trusted and they all want their friends in the team and all that jazz. Like
that's
it has to be like sports where an adult makes this decision. It can't be the players.
Well, the point that the thing that I was thinking of when I was listening to Cassad talk about that though, is that those guys, like the way that he was making it sound is that, you can find all these offensive coaches, you can find all these defensive coaches, you can find all these analysts who are going to be able to do all this. Right. And I'm just sitting here, like those, like guys like Cassad are worth their weight in gold. Like I can't think
they are, but the bizarre thing is though, I know what you mean, Sam. Like, here's the problem.
You know what I mean?
Basically, the issue is the rest of them don't exist. You're gonna have to build them up, and
you're gonna have to.
Yeah, that's true.
Long term.
But here's the issue. I know what you mean in the wider sense. I agree, but the problem is they haven't even hired the guys we're talking about, like the Cassards and the Zeuses of the world. They aren't even hired now. Like that's the reason. Like they at least should get. This is why, by the way, if people don't know, this is one of the reasons I said it in my video. It's one of the reasons I left Flashpoint. It wasn't just that we didn't have the top teams. It's that I knew, and I wasn't fucking correct. I knew we would never have the top teams and we would never sign the top players. And this is one of the reasons, Semler, is because I investigated the structure of all of these massive orgs with millions of dollars in money to spend. And they had the money to spend. Yeah. It's just that they never had the people in the structure who understood like to sign the player. And I would go to them and I would tell them, right, first thing you need before you get the players is the GM. And I gave them these shortlists. The shortlists were like Zeus, Cassard. There was a whole bunch of players, Raging, people like that were all on these lists. all they did when they did it, Semler, is either never hire anyone or they would go to the bottom of the list and go, yeah, we'll hire agents. Like, well, he was like, listen, he was on the list, but like, obviously I had Zeus number one. Like, these are the guys that, if you don't know, by the way, I can take it one step further. As an org, this shows you don't know CSGO esports. Because if you knew CSGO esports, you would know why Cassard and Zeus are legendary. Cassard ran a fucking squad of Australians and got them the semis at a major. Fucking Zeus took like the bad EG online and had them be good. You had Team Liquid and took them to the top of the world. Like, these guys, as you said, they are worth their weight in gold, mate. You sign these guys, that's like the first decision that just has 50 knock-on good effects on your org, and they won't do it. Instead, you go to these orgs, Semler, and their general manager who's making CSGO divisions is their old Overwatch coach from 3 years ago. Or it's a guy who like used to be a player in a racing game who now just has an office job as like, these can't be the guys, because these guys don't have any eye tests. They're not watching the game. They can't look at the game and go, this Sphinx guy could be amazing in 6 months. They don't have that nous. But that is essentially what their job requirement is, in my opinion. Because the problem is this: 3 or 4 years ago, these roles of general manager, it was a general job within an esports team. You just essentially handle business. Now it's a specialized job like a sport. If you're in an NFL team, Semler, there's not a guy there who's like, I only know business, I don't know the American football. That scout knows everything about American football. It's his whole job. His whole life's American football. So you do actually need, in my opinion, you need the people who put like 10 years into the game. They're the ones who will set your org right.
The way that I think about it is it's a green bananas and yellow bananas sort of situation. Green bananas take time to ripen. It takes work. You got to water them. You got to wait, right, for that investment to pay off. You're going to buy a bunch of green bananas. It's going to take some time, or you're going to buy a bunch of yellow bananas. And yellow bananas, hey, you get to eat right away. You sell them right away. You eat right away. You get your money back right away, right? So that's the idea, guys. Long-term, short-term. To me, the way that all this shapes up is that all of these orgs now realize just how desperately hard it would be to go with the green banana route, the long-term route. Because either they have to invest heavily into guys who are worth their weight in gold, like Assad, Zeus, others, or they need to be. Then this, like, Cloud9 encapsulates this perfectly for me. They really are just like I don't want to say the problem, but like this is them. Sit in the wings and be opportunistic and get the roster. So Gambit, picking up Gambit, that's Cloud9 in a nutshell. This is that whole American system, that VC system in a nutshell. It's like, oh, hold on. Somebody else has built something that's working over there. Wait, we can buy the whole thing? Great. Do that. Throw money at it. There you go. That's how these guys approach it, because they have no idea how to build the long term. They have no idea. For them, it's all just about like picking up a core, picking up a roster, picking up something that's already functioning, and trying to get as much of the support structure as well around it. Because that was one thing that Etienne talked about, where how he was so excited to work with Groove. He's like, I never thought I'd have the chance to work with this guy, but when I learned that he was a part of the package, I just had to have it. It's like, if you can get the support around it, you can build the roster like that, you can do all of that, then that's how those guys want to play it now. Because doing the long term, the team that came to mind and that I got really excited about way back in the day, and it was for this reason, was Cuban's Mad Lions. Do you remember how like they were talking about that when it first came out, where he was like, we're going to have structure, professionalism, like all that sort of shit, right? You know what I mean? Like, obviously,
no, I know that was the premise. It just didn't work out that way. Yeah,
it didn't work out that way. But like the vision, I was just like, fuck yeah, sign me up.
The reason I'm laughing is because there was a segment, because of Mad Lions, this exact team, that even got into a best of by the numbers. Because the reason we were laughing so hard is they signed some guy who was like a really inexperienced IGL, right? And when they signed him, Semler, they said all the right things, like, we're going to give him a chance to develop, and he's going to grow. And then they literally kicked him 1 week later, and they actually was so shameless, Semler, that within the actual wording of how they messaged that he was being kicked, they were like, he didn't actually develop within that. It's like, there's a week. It was a week. Like, mate, you can imagine. Yeah, like, I won't replay. You can go check out the episode. It was classic.
That also could be the whole issue with this whole fucking thing, dude. Because like Cuban's vision and how he wanted to pull all that off, wanted to invest in the players and build them up and make them professionals, right? Where they'd have like a steady schedule. You go to sleep at this hour, you wake up at this hour, you're going to exercise, you're going to eat well. We're going to be as a team. We're going to build it up. Here's your offense coach. Here's your defense coach. Like, it felt like Cuban had all of that lined up. But the investors behind it, those guys are looking for yellow bananas. They're not looking for green bananas, So it's like, And especially an org like Mad Lions, where I was just like, wow, Mad Lions, this is uncharacteristic of them. I never got the vibe off of them being like a team that wants to build into the future. It always felt like they were short-term, yellow bananas kind of guys. And
basically,
I feel like that's the issue.
What we're going to do is this, because as Semler correctly pointed out, there aren't that many people right now who have the true like experience base, like knowledge base, like nous to do this job of BGMs. We're going to have to grow the next generation. So Semler will be releasing his new children's book, Yellow Banana, Green Banana, Zipniks, and it's about navigating the difficult CSGO transfer market. It's about what strategy you use. And basically, do you want yellow bananas, do you want green bananas, or do you want to waste all your money on Zipniks? You can do one of the three. It's got all pictures in it, pop-ups, like everything.
Listen, props to Zip and his agent, whoever the fuck is doing that, pulling the wool over Astralis' eyes, dude. I mean, that is just the most amazing deal. If it's true, like what, 4 years of fucking hundreds of thousands, just like, I know how they pulled that off. It's just, that is the greatest salesman to walk the world.
Exactly. Although the only problem is, I heard basically they just copied device. Zipniks was like, I'd like to get paid millions, but not even have to turn up. Devi was like, see, we all stick together, always on the same page. That's the thing with our team, always on the same page.
Little aside, it sucks because like Zip actually had like a little bit of a revival.
Oh, he was actually,
tournament. Like, he was actually looking halfway decent.
That thing, if people don't realize, is because obviously they got beaten by Navi, that actually sort of like leveled his stats off. Before that, actually, he was actually he was having a little bit of
looking good.
He was feeling himself
against
again.
Navi, he just totally disappeared. But then again, to be fair, the whole team disappeared. It's not like it was just on him. It was like everybody fucking tanked on that. In that matchup. I don't know. I really appreciated Kassad. I like Kassad's way of looking at things. I just feel like we're going to need to find a way. Like, it has to be the Ents. It has to be like the guys who are looking for the long game, like build year on year. We're going to build it up properly. We're going to keep it reasonable. And it's like their whole CSGO system works because they're not overpaying their players. It all makes sense. So you need to find orgs like that who are willing to really build over the long term. And that's I think how it's going to work. Because otherwise, it's going to be like, oh, why aren't we seeing returns on our, investment that, you wrote a 5-year plan for, but we want something back in 6 months. And no coach is going to, if you're planning for 5 years, no coach is going to be able to be like, well, like we're going to take over the world in 6 months. That's not going to happen. So those investors are going to be on board for like the first 3 to 4 months. And then they're going to start being like, where money, please, where's my money? Where's my return on my investment? And it's just not going to happen. And the team is going to get yeeted. The coach is going to get fired, and then it's all going to fall apart from there.
By the way, one thing I think is really negative about that approach as well. This is one of the things about CSGO that really pisses me off, dude, because I actually told loads of people this is way before even Flashpoint. Like, I think in something like 2016, I made a video where I explained this concept, right? Which is the concept from sports that needs to exist in CSGO is, in sports, like, when someone's contract ends, like, that at the end of this season, he's available. So as a result, you don't just wait until the last day of the season. Like, sometimes if you're a lesser team, before the season begins, like at the end of this season, we're going to prepare a package to get LeBron James, Ronaldo, whoever the amazing player is. You build a whole thing and you build it years out. Like, you're planning, like, we want to have like a core of players that he might want to play with, but space for him. We need to have some salary space to sign him at the max amount. And basically you create like a sort of an attractive destination for that player. But this is the key thing to understand, Semler. If he doesn't sign, you're not shit out of luck. You've got the next people on the short list. So my problem is this. I said this years ago, because I used to have old friends that were in teams like Cloud9, Team Liquid, and they'd always be saying the same thing, like, oh, we need like another AWPer though, so who do we get? And you'd look around the scene, it's like, well, obviously everyone's contracted. So they'd always have to be gambling, like, well, this guy like in MDL like looks good. And so I just said to them, like, bro, if you could pick tomorrow, if I said money's no object, like we're talking about like 2016, remember here. I said, if you could pick anyone, you probably pick like Skadoodle if it's an NA team, right? I said, why not just literally plan to get Skadoodle? I said, go to Skadoodle, say to him, when does your contract end? If it's in 6 months or a year or whatever, plan so that within the rest of what you're doing, you still operate your team, but that's a window when you will look to potentially get Skadoodle. They don't do it though, Semler. And the reason it kills me is because it actually makes the scene weaker. Because what people do instead is this. Because they let players decide when they need to make the roster move. You make a team that's all right. You play a few tournaments, and what happens is you have a really bad loss, like the Major or Cologne, one of the big events of the year. Let's say you finish 9th, but you're supposed to be like a top 5 team. So then you go, panic stations, we need to change a player now. And because you have to change him now, you have to get Farley, or you have to get some random pickup that like probably isn't going to work. If instead you said we have to make a change, but you have an actual timeline, You can now plan to get a really good player. You go, right, let's see who's available. Like, so I've got Device, I've got this guy. You map them all out. Who would be interested now? Who might be interested in 6 months? What would it take for them to be interested in a year? That's sports. Like, because in that scenario, you can see how if you do the right decisions there, even in the short term, if you're not getting results, in the long term, you are going to make enough right decisions. You're going to turn your team around. You're going to make a top team. There's too much sort of luck. Like luck now's even like, when's your contract end? Are you willing to leave now? Like, there's too much sort of rolling the dice for me. It's not proper sports. You're not planning.
What are the steps? I mean, is it reaching out to like the sports side of things and being like, okay, we need an ex-GM or somebody to start explaining that?
Well, this is why that job,
in
CS,
right?
the problem is that job just doesn't really properly exist. I'm sort of saying in CSGO.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I mean, this feels like that as we're discussing it, I'm sitting here thinking, this sounds like a very familiar conversation that we've been having for a long time in terms of like who actually holds the reins of the team.
This is why they wanted the Henry G's of the world, coming into teams so you could potentially trust someone. And the idea is, because essentially the way it would run previously is usually you have a player that's like that. Like, so if it was like G2, I'm sure it's Nico or whatever, it's like Carlos's boy. But the premise is like that in itself has a shelf life, because what if it's the player that you need to remove eventually? You know what I mean? Like, eventually he has to potentially be on the chopping block too.
That's why the French scene is just so vile. And
of
that
course.
respect is they all there's a lot of baggage in the French scene, because those were the guys that were always shanking each other in the back. Like, it was always just like this group against this group, and like, oh, we don't like this guy now. Like we were best friends with him yesterday, but he's, it's so poisonous. We've seen how that works in the past with those teams where they just completely implode. And then, well, I mean, actually you look down the line and there isn't much of a French scene going on. Maybe we'll have a super team now coming up, built around Kenny and Shocks and NBK and Amanek, and who else could, maybe
the obvious thing is just bring existence back, make the team, make the team. Well, he's not even called existence now, though. He's changed his name like Akuos or some shite on Twitter. I don't know what the fuck you do, mate.
Why did he do that? Why? You have a brand. You're known in CSGO. You're a legend. That's tragic. Well, do we want to? I think we have time for like one more topic.
Yeah,
we want to actually try.
And we'll do a few questions after that.
Oh, right, yeah. But like, do we want to try to address this G2 issue?
Let's do it. Go on.
Because I mean, all right. Here's my, I guess, my beef with this whole situation is once again you have a story coming out and it says Xdaz and Alexi B are going to be on the transfer list and they're going to be looking for options. That tweet comes out, that story comes out, no byline. So I was already like, I don't know how legit this is. But then Carlos comes along and tweets no, basically in response to it.
He's absolutely done you with that tweet, Annie. I know.
Dude, it pissed me off so much.
At all. I know.
It pissed me off so much because I'm just like, okay, so there is no trade coming, I guess, because
Carlos
doesn't fuck around. Like,
he doesn't lie. I'll say that. Yeah, you do believe he's telling the truth.
Yeah, I believe he's telling the truth. He has a good track record of no bullshit. Like he says it how it is. And so I'm like, fine, fair enough. Okay, then fuck this story, and the roster's gonna stick together. And then like a few days later, it turns out Alexi B is on. No more mention of Xdaz. So I'm actually just a little bit miffed with it because I'm just like, fucking Carl. Like, did he? So he says no, maybe because he has plausible deniability. Like,
he sort of bantered you.
I didn't. So
yeah,
I didn't outright lie.
No, basically.
The
joke
is going to be.
Here's the joke for you, Samuel. No, here's the joke for you. Are you ready? Obviously, okay. Carlos now, because he understands how important it is to appeal to American cultural standards, he's obviously he's used fact checking, hasn't he? He got a fact checker, and you know what they said, Samuel? They said Alexi B and Xstars are both on the market. Fact check, mostly false. They are both not on the market. Only Alexi B is. Because the joke is, just like every one of those fact checks, the actual essential fact is always true, but they just phrase it to make it sound like it's not true, innit? Because that's basically, as far as I can tell, I agree with you. My assumption is, even though by saying no, you're going to immediately make people think the whole thing's fake, in reality, it's just that maybe at the moment it's only Alexi B and maybe you hadn't decided on next star. So you have sort of tried to have your cake and eat it on that one for sure.
I was fuming. I was like, that is actually a little bit of a fucked up move, Carlos. I was like, I don't appreciate this. But sure enough, it looks like Alexi B is on his way, or at least, potentially he can look for options. And then also, usually that means that he's on his way out, but also Jax. recently announced that he's also going to be on the transfer list and can look for options.
His was the more
mention of the other
depressing
players.
one, because I know that's just the way they phrase it now. Simple, they just say this player can look for options.
Basically,
Here's the
they wanna get rid of
difference: Alexi B can look for options. Jax's option is just fuck off. Like that's it. Like the joke is he has to be on that French team with Kenny and that. There's nowhere else for you, Jax. Like I'm sorry, mate. This was the team.
Well, they're all living up in that
I know.
tax haven anyways. They're all up in Andorra between France and Spain, just chilling out. You know, so whatever. Like they've got the team already in location. They can just land together at this point. Just make a team. Go for it. Go for it, lads. But I mean, that's like, it's so brutal because who actually had that off the top of my head? I think it was Yanko in an interview where he kind of outlined, you know, he kind of like put the timeline together where, you know, there was that peak and then the drop off. And then it just kind of like timing didn't really line up with events, with how everything worked out. They had a month off when they were just starting to heat up. And then there you go. It all kind of just falls apart from there. You're left stewing on a poor result when you're thinking that we should have had more. And sure enough, you probably should have had more. And if you had more time, maybe, but this is also just going to be one of those situations where we just have to speculate, you know, who has a track record of getting rid of teammates or, you know, having difficulty with IGLs. I mean,
it's like I've always said somewhere, because I think this is the fairest way to phrase it.
Okay,
technically, I mean, spoiler, in FaZe, I do know who was involved. I had contacts with nearly all the players. Oh, imagine that if I had all the info. But let's pretend I don't. Like, remember, just like more on fans, I don't know anything. I don't have any behind the scenes contacts. I mean, I bring people on shows that give all the great straight fire all the time, but they can never do that, you know, off camera. But anyway, that to one side. The ridiculous thing is this: even if I speculate, it's like you say, you nailed it there. All that needs to be said if you're Nico is this, mate, if you really aren't ever affecting any of these transfers, but bizarrely everything you want and all the people you want kicked end up being kicked and what you want ends up happening, you are either the luckiest son of a bitch of all time or the most unlucky, because it just doesn't play, does it? Like, here's the problem. It doesn't even have to be that he is the one who's the impetus or wants him out or whatever. As you say, these things just have a way of happening in Nico teams. It's just it's the way it goes, isn't it?
That's the takeaway from it, right? It's hard to, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it sounds like, I mean,
then Nico wants it the fuck out because he only likes swans or something. That would be like, basically we could make like a whole, you know, philosophy book, like quotes, but they're just about Nico instead.
This is the tragic situation though, because I mean, the reality is, it's just like, holy shit, where do you go now? Because Alexi B was supposed to be like hailed as this great leader who was going to gel with Nico. They're posting pictures on Instagram of them, you know, partying and have a great time when they all join up. Like, everything's great, guys, and it lasts like 3 to 4 months, because basically at that point, you know that like Alexi B, he probably knows that he's on his way out at that point. Like, things are rocky. It's not going well. So what, the last month is just like trying to, but everybody deep down knows that this isn't going to work out, I guess. But where do you go from here? Like, who are you bringing on? Oh, okay, hold on. What does that face mean?
I could speculate if you'd like. I could take a crazy flyer, and then if it just happened to come true, then again, I don't have any context. I just got lucky. So here's one for you. Are you ready for a fun one? Because this is one I actually suggested a few months ago. Because to me, if I knew that you don't want Alexi B, this is an obvious move. Who got benched from Fnatic a few months ago?
No,
Alex. And remember, this is a key detail people forget. You have to know the law to know this. Alex was supposed to join FaZe Clan instead of Cloud9 back in the day. But what happened was FaZe Clan just took that was the player Nico wanted after the Vitality time. But apparently Nico and Yanko said that like the deal just didn't get done in time. Like FaZe was just like start dragging their feet. Like, if you notice, they do take a long time to get deals done, even when it's sort of not like everyone knew Carragher was going to join and Rob. So like, it's true. Sure. So basically, like, he's available. That would even, he speaks English. He needs the team, and so I think that, to me, wouldn't that all fit? Wouldn't it be worth a shot? And it's not even a bad sort of pivot. Like, I actually like both of them in different ways. Either. And I'll even say as well, to me, I actually think Alex's style of play will vibe more with Nico. Because here's the thing, Alexi B was sort of more like the brain IGL. And Alex is a bit more of like a little bit more default style, maybe, you know, like he certainly has his ideas, but he's going to let Nico play how he wants to play. He's had Zebu, remember?
That's the thing. That's the point, right? If you're going to think about Alex, you think that, okay, he's an IGL who should know how to put star players in star positions and let them get to work, right? Stand out of the way.
In fact, there's even an angle for why you sign him to this team. Monacy, you've got this young prodigy AWPer. It's like Zimu, right? Let's find out how to use him best. Let's set him up the best. Let's flash everyone so he gets all those kills easily, or whatever that dreaded line he said about Zimu was in 2019.
The idea is really interesting as well, because you know that Alex has had this chip on his shoulder ever since. Because,
for sure.
Everybody's like,
and Stars was Alex's coach, dude.
Yeah.
The more I talk about, the more it's fucking
all come together.
Spoiler: I might have known something about that, so I'm sorry. Keep going. I might have had a tiny wee little. We'll see. No one else does though, Sam. You'll know. I mean, this show's probably going to come out tomorrow, the day after. No other fucking show will have that info. They're just still busy asking twist shit questions like, "So what was Team Liquid like?" And then he's like, "You know what? Guy on this HLTV, this is the greatest podcast I've ever been a part of." Like, all right, mate. You know what? That just makes me think, wow, Twist does have really amazing headshot ability. Because obviously not his fucking brain, is it? Well, I think he's all right, actually. That's just a flame. It's a bit of a stray. Bring it back, though. What do you think? Because that's the problem I have with this move. It's like, if it was to be like an Alex, because I can't think who else it would be, by the way. I don't know who the fuck else is even available. Like, that's not a terrible one. And the thing is, I will say, like, I sort of agree with Yanko. I actually think, like, the timing of this team, basically, this team looks almost cursed, mate. Like, they zigged every time they should have zagged.
Yeah.
So, for example, they made the final of one of the first events, Katowice. That was when their coach couldn't play because he had COVID. And like, then right after, as you're saying, right when you want to make use of that, like, we're on form, then they have that Pro League debacle where they can't even use Alexi B and they don't get out the grip. Like, the whole thing was a fucking nightmare, wasn't it? Like, they have just and then the major was terrible. They didn't make any impact. Like, Cologne here's been shit. Yeah, basically all their good moments came when it was the least important and they couldn't capitalize. And then they've had all the down moments in the big moments. So I have to agree. Like, if a team like that happens, I even think, by the way, I agree with the premise of two changes. I don't think that's a one change move. Now, I might not have agreed with the Alexi B angle, and this is, I think Alexi B is good, but I have to say it's not like it's worked in the server. And it's why, if you notice, my tweeting style about this topic is very different to everyone else, because my perspective is this, Semler. If this really is the case that fundamentally someone like Nico and the others can't play at their best when Alexi B is the leader, that's fine. That can be possible. Obviously, he's not like the ultimate IGL of all time. You have to have the right personnel. But here's the issue, though. If the next set of players to come in this team, Semler, somehow in any way doesn't work with Nico, I have to start for real having the question, is it Nico? You know what I mean? Like, eventually that has to be the question you ask yourself, because you look at all these other superstar players in the world and they've been able to work with many different teammates and different team styles and stuff. Like, this guy just seems like he has a very particular, like, whatever he defines as comfort seems almost like it's some Princess and the Pea shit, mate. It's a bit too far for me, I think. I'm a bit concerned that he's too high maintenance in a way, you know.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That's what I started to wonder about.
Yeah, the Princess and the Pea. For any of you guys wondering, it's the mattresses, the stacking of mattresses, and then there's a little pea at the bottom, under the last mattress, and the princess can feel it, so you can't sleep because it's just that little thing, through like 10 mattresses. That's a really good way to put it, because it really does make you wonder, right? Because Nico, with his track record, you feel like he hits fucking hard.
For sure.
Now, especially now, by this time, should be a veteran player, long in the tooth, able to work with anybody. You would think, right? Able to work with anybody and still perform. Like, it's not like it's his first rodeo. He's been around for a long time. So you would think. I think you're bang on the money. And I think it's interesting, this Alex angle, actually, if you stack it up, it sounds actually pretty interesting. That is not an angle, because that, like, Fnatic was clearly a debacle. Cloud9. It's just been a poor string for Alex.
He's had some really bad luck, in my opinion, with his squads.
Rough turns. So,
and also, I'll throw this in there. It's not like I took it like from nowhere. I actually said when he was benched, I did a tweet where I basically said, if I were the two teams, I would trade, by the way. If I was the fucking guys from Fnatic, I'd want Alexi V. Why not? Like, why not just trade either way, do a contract deal and both give it a go? Because one last thing I would say is this, right? In theory, if you know, like, the sort of game theory of how you run sports teams, players like Nico are actually supposed to be effectively untradeable, Summer. They're supposed to be so insanely valuable that you can, like, for example, if someone gives you $1 million, like supposedly G2 did for Nico, you never really get the value for that. Like, it's not like you can spend that million and get the same in the server. Like, they're too valuable. And on top of that, because they're so absurdly good, like, think about it, Nico's longevity is, there's like 2 or 3 players ever in the game have longevity like that, and they are simple in device, quite frankly. There's not many people. So if you have that longevity, that's the other reason you're not supposed to trade those players, because they can come back to being the best in the world every year. They can constantly deliver output. But here's all I'll say, and this food for thought might actually blow some people's brains if you think about it. You would have said the same thing in FaZe Clan, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have said in Face Clan, if I had to pick between the two, who would I keep, Carrigan or Nico? Everyone would have told you Nico because he's a superstar, right? Spoiler, Nico left Face Clan, and Face Clan is the #1 team in the world now. And by the way, none of the players on Face Clan are as good as Nico. It's not like Rops is as good as Nico or Brokey or whatever. So this just shows you can win without Nico. So the key thing for me is this. Either we get the pieces now. So like, shit, I'll get off the pot. You spend the money now, you get the final pieces Nico wants, and then we just have to do it. Like now you really have to win, Nico. We have to win the major,
now you
have to go to #1. But if you don't, I have to actually consider, like, are you the reason I can't bring these bloody players in? Because I've got a lot of players here that we're having to kick out by it. I can't be kicking people every 6 months. It has to be a real squad eventually.
And especially, I mean, even if G2 are one of those teams with fuck off money who just seem to be able to spend whatever they want and actually have a leader who is willing to pull the trigger and spend that kind of money, that still doesn't mean that it's you know, it's reasonable for them to be just like, every 6 months we're going to spend another $1 or something to try and get somebody else off of another roster. That's crazy. I mean,
the one I find weird, dude, is I don't know if you see this, but I actually see a lot of people flame Monacy. Do you notice that? I don't get it myself, because here's the thing. I always just remember the facts. He's a fucking 16-year-old kid who just joined the land circuit this year. Yeah. Remember, dude, Semler was watching this guy in an academy league last year. So like, when I actually look at his level, I don't think there's anything wrong with his level at all. It looks good.
This is where it's crazy as well, because on that academy team, in that academy league, that whole team, it was like Kenny S and Titan 2014 or something. Like the entire team is built around him on Navi Academy, and he's not playing against tier 1 opposition. So just think about like everything being, it's like the best marketing strategy ever. They're doing everything they can to make this guy look as good as possible to sell him to one of the top teams in the scene who have millions of dollars. It could not have gone better for Navi. They played it perfectly. The whole reason Navi Academy exists was for that. And so now, you know, he's actually on that he's actually on that tier 1 team, and he had a strong start. I think that maybe why is there's so much hype around him because he has all those he has that really intense kind of flick, crazy, aggressive style, really flashy, gets a lot of highlight reels. But also he had a strong start at Katowice, right? So I think in people's minds, you know, that kind of stuck. And so they were like, oh, you know, well, if he's not always up there, well, then, you know, obviously he's struggling. Obviously he's dropping off. It's like, dude, he didn't even have that bad.
He was fine, mate. Like, put it this way, in general, I haven't really seen him ever play like bad consistently. At worst, he was average. And most of the time, I think he's slightly above average. The real problem, I think, is this, Semler. Sadly, fucking Ziwu and Bit have ruined it for everyone, because now they've made everyone act like every rookie's supposed to just go to #1. Be like the best player in the world. Like, that's incomprehensible that those guys did it. Monacy is tracking perfectly well if you know his age. He is literally right now, he's 17 now. He's just turned 17. But he's only 17 years old, guys. Like, I wouldn't even worry about if I was. This is also, though, I will say, this is why I actually was one of the few people who didn't say it was a slam dunk that you signed Monacy at the beginning, because I knew it cost a lot of money. For this reason, I said, the good news is this: if Nico and Hunter play like they're supposed to, you're fine, because he only has to be the 3rd best player. But the problem is, if Nico and Hunter, like, Nico has had some bad tournaments. If Nico doesn't play as well, now you're going to put pressure on a guy who isn't supposed to have pressure. It's his first year of his career, guys. Like, he's not supposed to frag out in all these lands. Like, I think he's doing fine. And I think if I'm sort of tracking where he's going in MG2, he's totally on course. The point is, next year is when he could be a fucking, like, that's when he could just break out and start dominating, you know. Give him a year's worth of lands and ages and all that jazz. He's going to be there eventually. Like, the eye test checks out like a motherfucker on this guy, in my opinion.
It's just, you need to allow, you can't compare new players, young players that are coming in now to young players that were coming in 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? When like Simple was starting out, there weren't massive, gigantic fucking events like this, right? Like, he was still going to some shitty lands.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Even majors were DreamHacks back then, mate. That's all you need to know. Yeah.
Even majors, you know, back then it was like, oh, we have 500 people in the crowd. Holy shit, this is awesome. You know, like that's the level. Like, that's the thing you have to remember. So like those guys, the stars of today had a lot of time to ramp up and build.
They did,
it, right?
Yes.
Whereas, you know, Monacy, 16, now 17, gets chucked right into some of
the. Dude, I think its first LAN event was like Katowice, fucking Katowice, like one of the main events in the whole world. I know.
Into the deep end and swim, bro. You know,
that's like your fucking. That's like your NFL debut, just be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
just in the Super Bowl. Like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and I better handle it, and he did. That's the thing.
So, yeah.
No, it's. I don't think you can give any kind of flack to this guy. This is definitely going to be this is going to be a green bandit.
The good news with these moves, as much as like it's so messy that they've got to do all these signings now, and there's the drama of Nico and Alexi B and Isaac Starshiner as you get. The good news is this: as long as they do have those three pieces, Nico, Hunter, and Monacy, that's a great three pieces to fucking build with. Like, you could very quickly build back to another team. Like, it was actually implied by Cassard, by the way, on that episode, based on what he's heard, that like, if you look at some of the players that are in the scene, like he's heard, for example, like maybe JKS goes to, I think he said Vitality instead of Basuta. Like, there's players out there that can be signed in the scene. So if G2 makes the right signings, they could be a top team, of course. The scene is wide open right now. Anyone who makes the right roster move can go right to top 3 at this point in time. It's open. Those spots are there, especially now that Ents is losing Spinks as well, for fuck's sake. Like, these moves are available. Like, maybe JKS was actually G2. Maybe that was the move. I think he might even be G2. Yeah,
that could be a G2 play, because
I think he meant instead of Jax. Yes, I think he said that JKS was going to be the bomb site anchor or something instead of Jax. I think that was what he said the angle was.
Interesting.
Would be a good move.
Because I don't know if he still has his visa or not.
I think he does, because I believe I know that when he was playing with, that's the reason he got to play with FaZe, because he still had a visa in Denmark or some shit. Yeah,
he was living in Copenhagen or something.
Yes,
like that.
So I believe he's available still. Yeah,
that would be.
I think it's a good move though. I'll try that.
Talk about catching the train as it leaves the station, though.
That would be perfect for everyone.
Visa and you're going back to Australia and you have no visa to come and stay in Europe.
Oh, that would be game over. That would be the end of his career completely.
You just retire at that point.
Because essentially it'd be just such an arse on to get the visa, and would waste the time doing it, guys.
Yeah. It would be too much. It would be too much of an ask.
I would love that though, because one would mean the return of JKS to the scene. I do think he's a good player. I've always enjoyed his career. And two, I actually think, based on what Cassard's saying, this is why, by the way, you want people, I think, the raw eye test of all these players. He used to be JKS's coach, obviously. He knows that he'll fit the role. Like, that actually role-wise would make sense. I'll even add in as well, by the way, JKS always been a clutch player. I'd love to have another fucking clutch player on an eco team. Let's get some fucking wins, boys.
All right, get it.
Do some questions to wrap then.
Yeah, let's do some questions.
Yeah, go on then. I'll just grab a couple. So, okay, if people don't know, we don't obviously have a Patreon anymore, hence why y'all ain't paying me, and hence why y'all don't get to be my fucking, but you're never my boss anyway. Let's be real. No one was ever my boss. Understand that. In fact, it's me saying to my bosses, you're not my boss. It tends to get me fired. I've never actually been fired. Don't worry about that. I was fired for 1 game, but that's it. Right. So, on this one, though, we use the Grog coin, which is a type of cryptocurrency tailored by Rally specifically for us. And basically, if you own 25 of them, you can ask a question for shows like this, the Four Horsemen, and for Summoning Insight if you're a League of Legends fan. Go to the Discord server for Insight on esports. There are some Grog coin channels. Go to the main one. There'll be a pinned tweet with like an explanation of how you buy the coin, how you get the crypto. And then once you have them, there's a channel. It'll say, by the numbers BTN, you put your questions there. And if they're interesting, I ask them, or Semel asks them, and we answer the questions. So I'll do these ones for this one. In the future, I'll just get the questions and paste them all to you. But for the moment, I'll do it. Right. Here's one for you. Let me see. There's not too many. Some of these we can do quick. Right, here's one for you, Semler. Right. Manakino, I'm just going to call the names out. Manakino says, what's the difference in experience between doing live content or recorded content from the perspective of a content creator? Do you prefer one or the other? Because, I mean, the reason he's asked that, I think he said it in brackets, is because obviously By the Numbers famously used to be live. Well, actually, by the way, it's supposed to be live again. We were going to try doing it this week. It's just unfortunately the producer actually fell ill on the day of the recording, so we're recording it remotely again. We're going to try doing it live again, so you guys can be in the chat and type stuff that I will never read, because if I read, it would make me melt down and destroy you all. So I'll as usual, I'll click that little arrow to the side, and then you can all shut the fuck up. So what do you think of that? What do you think the difference is between live and recorded for you?
In terms of I feel like when you it's just pressure under the gun, right? Because you're live, there's no retakes. That's why TV, that's why doing E-League was so much fun.
Sure.
Because it's just like live TV, that's it. It's like a different kind of pressure, different flavor. All of a sudden it's spicy, it's a little bit more spicy, because it's just like this is it, go time, right? In a way that never really was the same with when we were streaming on Twitch. It's like, yeah, you're streaming Twitch and it's live and all that, but it's esports, and you kind of like, whatever. It doesn't have that whole aura around it of just, don't fuck up. Whereas like E-League was just like, you had that when we were going live on TBS, it was like, don't fuck up. And you're like, okay then. So there's that. I mean, it's the obvious that there's just a little bit of extra spice in live, because you want to come up with the zingers, you want to come up with the quick one-liners, you want to have those good moments, and you cherish those moments, because it's just like, fuck yeah, you came up with that on the spot, you nailed it, bam, that was great, it all clicked, and that's a feel-good moment, right? Whereas recorded, recorded, it can be, you can have a bit more time to think it over. You can have do-overs. Maybe I wanted to elaborate on this point and I didn't do it live. It didn't occur to me at that point in live. So, you get these like other moments where it's like having training wheels on, like you can start over again, or like you can elaborate on a point or make yourself look better, in a sense. Like it is that. It's just like live is very much just straight to the truth. And I think it's a bit more real. And so I appreciate doing things live much more than I appreciate doing recorded, just because, it's like right there in the moment. You got to be on. You can't mess around with it.
The only thing is, though, in a way, I actually think that's actually a downside of recorded content sometimes, because I know a lot of people, I'm the opposite, because basically the reason I'm suited to live content is even when I began doing videos for YouTube, for example, I didn't used to know a lot about text. I didn't edit back then. I used to just do it in one take. Yeah, and if I coughed or, fucked up, I'll just keep going and just live with the fucking consequences, right? So I always had the mindset for live anyway, which is essentially you just keep going. You don't let yourself, like, for example, you don't get thrown that you mispronounce something and you just keep fucking rolling, you get it right next time, right? So the reason why I actually think that mindset's also more healthy is because I feel like some people use the safety net and knowing they could record again, and they go way too far. Like, I know obviously that is how YouTube started with that meta where they had to do 1 million takes so that every half a sentence is like upbeat and like you're doing some weird like children's presenter things. I always found a bit creepy personally. I prefer like the vibe of someone just having a conversation. But I will say, too many people, they think if they fuck up once and it's recorded, they have to like redo it. It's like, you don't have to do it for basic things. Like, I'll give you a mad example. I don't think you even care that I'd say this. Like years and years and years ago, we're talking like 6 or 7 years ago, I think it was Moses or Yanko, one of the two, I can't remember which one, was at an event. And they were like, oh yeah, because they just released like a YouTube video. And they were like, I had to record it like 3 times because I fucked up the first 2. And I was like, just take the sentence that you did wrong out. Like, what do you mean you record the whole 20-minute video again? Like, it's not a theatre production, like, what are you talking about? Like, I know that's mental in it. So to me, I think people can go way too far with that. Like, but as a general thing to say, I would just say it's like that. Yeah, it's more like, in my opinion, live is more sort of like, it's a bit like in the moment, impromptu, think up a funny thing, roll with it as you go. Yeah, essentially, the joke is live is all about like the flow and the live momentum. Like, if you don't let things get stuck somewhere or go too far away, you want to keep it all rolling, keep it nice and light, able to bounce all over the place. If you do something in a structured manner, though, pre-recorded, you can just go to way higher depth and structure, can't you? You can have a whole section. You can know you're going to tie back into a point. You can set things up in a certain way. You can even edit it later so the order's different. Like, there's so many things you can do.
There's stuff like like there's a podcast that I follow where they do it in one go. They'll do the podcast like you and I are doing right now, except that in the post prod, then the guy comes in and they shoot it in front of a green screen so that the whole, like, everything that they talk about, the back of them just turns into that screen. And so it's like this article, this video, this whatever, and it's all just like in post-production, just coming in, so it's like you can do cool things like that recorded as well that I think would be a little bit harder to do live. I mean, you could in theory do that live. It just feels like it'd be a bit more demanding, but it's just live just hits different.
The only thing is, I will say, as a general approach, even though I do enjoy doing certain things live, the main reason I prefer recorded is just so I have control of my own schedule in my life. Like, I think my life's at its best when I don't feel like I have to do this at that time. And it's more like I choose when I do it. That's how I prefer things generally,
Yeah,
but let's do another one. Right. Architect of Korean esports based Joe, that's the alias of the guy, says, does Fortnite low-key... Oh, fuck this guy. He's done this to trigger, I can tell, but we'll read it anyway. So I won't respond first. I'll read it first before I respond to them, okay? Right. Does Fortnite low-key have the highest skill ceiling among any esports games? APM requirements rivals StarCraft. Hit scan weapons, huge maps. I'll hold it. And the dev sometimes changes the entire game mid-tournament. Right? Oh, that at the end he got me, didn't he? Because I was thinking it was some like the last part is a troll. The part, because there's no way he would present as a feature that they changed the game mid-tournament. I wondered where he was going with that, because I was even thinking that surely no one knows enough about like APM to know that APM exists, but then would naively think like Fortnite has as much as StarCraft. That's just a troll question, isn't it? Like, put it this way, it was a well put together question. Whoever did that one, fair play to you. You got us at the end there. You had us in the first half. You had us in the first half, but Low-key, no, it does not, of course, Phil. Even when people say that thing like, there's a lot of skill in the building, I don't give a fuck, mate. I'm sorry. I'm just an elitist. I've always been one. I've never pretended to be like, all esports are welcome. They're not welcome. Get the fuck out, Fortnite. Get out. And that Booger guy winning that esports awards years ago, there's a reason I fucking left that shit. I'm not being a part of that. You're not going to tell me Booger's better than Simple and fucking Caps, but you daft twat. He's definitely not. So, okay, here's the next one. This is a real question. Snake Gold asks, is CSGO lacking something in particular to make it more popular? So do you have an idea what would make it more popular? It's obviously a mad open-ended question, but do you have any ideas? Is there something that's missing? Do the Zoomers want something we don't have?
No, it's just, I think it's going to rubber band back, because right now we're in this period where it's just, for the past few years, it's just the PC side of things makes it very difficult to advertise in CSGO. And so because it's hard to monetize a CSGO broadcast for all tournament organizers, it's always been the same. It's very difficult to monetize CSGO. And so because of the whole CT&T side, it's like you got guys running around planting bombs and shooting people in the face with AKs. Like it's because it's so real. It's not cartoony. It's real in the sense that it's AKs, it's blood, it's bullets, it's all that, bombs. It's a very hard thing to sell. So I think what's going to happen though is that appeals to a certain audience, and I think that audience is definitely out there. It's clear from other games like PUBG, Tarkov, like their popularity. It's like people also want real, and so I think it was just going to rubber band back, and eventually these advertisers are going to realize, like, wait, hold on, like there's this whole untapped market over here that we're not getting involved with, that's actually popping off, that has millions of viewers around the world. Like we need to actually get involved with this somehow, and it's going to rotate back around it. So the pendulum will swing back around the other way. So I don't want to fuck with the game too much, because like I feel like the devs have already fucked with the game in terms of the economy, to the point where I hate it still. It's still my biggest pet peeve that there's just the economy is so forgiving now in how it plays. I wish that I miss it being a bit more cutthroat the way it was back in the day. It added a little bit more spice to certain rounds, because you knew if they fucked up, like that was a big deal. Now it's like, oh, well, I guess they'll just, force up with some rifles again. And you're just like, fuck's sake. It's not the same thing. So rather than make changes, like radical changes to the game in an appeal to bring in some audience, I think we stick with the game that we've got, and then we try and just win over the audience. We win over the audience in the long term, saying, yeah, this is not, it's violent, but that's fine. Like you want that. There's a certain that appeals to a certain number of people. Just look at fighting sports, look at all the other things. Like it's there. We just have to keep going at it and not get discouraged by markets like Germany that they're
never going to get it, man.
They're never going to get it. Like it's just, abandon Germany, abandon ship, and just move on to something else,
No, first of all, I definitely agree. Like what people don't understand about that is, even if there were things you could do that would make the game more popular, some of them, like Semmel's implying, might just kill the spirit of the game. Like the whole point is, I'm sorry, if you don't like violence and real, that is what Counter-Strike is. By definition, it's fucking simulation of counter-terrorism forces, for fuck's sake. Like by definition, it has to be violent, doesn't it? Like if anything, I think it's absurd that we're all following League of Legends. It's like, oh, Timo split pushing. It's like, who gives a shit? It's a little fucking B character or something with a fucking like putting out like mushrooms. You can't, like, what's this, Dora the Explorer? So to me, Counter-Strike just is a hardcore game. Basically, my answer to this one's a quick one, sort of a cheat, but it's one I answer often. What I would do to make CS more popular, so I can't do it now, I'd have to do it for CSGO 2, I guess, is I would just have a better fucking publishing approach in Korea and China. I think basically they just do a really poor job with that, which is why those games are never played. They're not in the PC bangs over there. So if you could nail that, if you could figure out how to get the games in the PC bangs and get some hype, the day Koreans ever en masse play the game, similar scene in Overwatch, what happens, Koreans would be amazing at CSGO. Even in Valorant, they're pretty good now. Like if you had enough people play, you would have a way bigger scene, because if Koreans watch and play, it adds to those fucking numbers. I'm telling you, they go hard for the fucking game. So there's one. Right, let's do another question. We got that's a good one though. That's a really it's a pretty standard one. But
I mean, that's the key to success for League of Legends, for all of these massive
loads of them. And that's the one thing we don't have in CSGO. Basically, we don't have like a proper Asian market at the moment. Right, here's one for you. Blaz says, how would you compare Brokey to other AWPers on legendary major winning teams from history? Also, how do you compare him to the other current great AWPers? What's your sense? Like in history, there's obviously been some really great players who have won the major, like Kenny S, fucking Device, Simple. Like
that's the thing.
Where would you put
I don't put
Brokey?
him up there with those guys though. That's the issue. I think Brokey is much more like, well, to be fair, he is the top rated player on his team now coming out of
That's
this
true.
event.
Yeah.
So, he's redeemed. He is pushing the level up. I just don't think that he has reached that high yet. He's not a Kenny yet. He's not a Simple yet. He's not a Device yet. He's not, but like we've pointed out, I mean, we've talked about this at length on this show today, is that he doesn't need to be that yet either. The team is so deep with talent that he doesn't need to be one of these guys who just takes over a server in that fashion, the way that others have in the past, JW, et cetera. I don't know. Like JW is one, like where, like he used to have that ability to take things over. He was so explosive with his play. So, I mean, I don't think that he compares in a 1-to-1 yet with any of those guys. In fact, I don't think that, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't. It just occurred to me, maybe like Fallen back in the day in terms of like impact on the team, because Fallen,
it's not a bad shout. Yeah,
Fallen still had cold, Fallen still had heavy hitters on his team, so he didn't need the hard carry. So maybe that would be like the 1-to-1, I guess, is like.
No, actually, I think, by the way, I think that's a pretty good call, because here's the other thing. These are the players that are more about like win a big clutch with the AWP. It's not like AWPing in the sense of like, wins clutches. Yeah, it's not like, oh my God, he got like 25 AWP kills on that CT side of trip. They're not that type of AWPer. Yeah, it's more like the big moment in it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so maybe Brokey, like maybe that would be your guy, is that he doesn't need to be this all powerful fucking AWP that takes over the server. Like he's doing his job. He's clearly doing it well. And the best part about it is that he's clearly comfortable and he's getting better. So he could potentially one of these days like shape up into be one of those players that just continues to improve and then just starts taking over the way that a Simple or a Device or Kenny or somebody else has in the past. But I think right now, yeah, if anything, he's a Fallen sort of guy where he's like in the middle of the pack. He's getting some key rounds here and there, but he doesn't need to hard carry.
Yeah, the problem is, if you think of all the people that have won the major, like, look, he's obviously better than like Fifth Laren, maybe even Smiths in LDLC. I'd say he's a little bit better than Moore from Gambit, a little bit. But as you say, if you go to the top end, the Simples, you can forget about that. Like they would like the contender for best player in the world, and they were far and away the best players in their teams. Their whole teams revolve around them. As you say, Brokey isn't like top player. In fact, I think the good thing for Brokey is this. I actually feel mega vindicated, mate, because I told people all last year, for the last 2 years, that the flaw was, like last year, Brokey was probably the best player in this team along with Twists, right? Maybe even could have been Brokey. If he's your best player, then you're not going to do shit. But if he can be like he is now, like your third best player, now we can start talking, mate, because now he actually can do that. Now he can do that with some consistency. He can give me that impact. And I've got enough good players elsewhere. I even think Brokey's a really weird AWPer, because the story, if people don't know, is before he joined FaZe, he wasn't an AWPer apparently. He just took that role for the team. Well, you can see it, because if you see the way he AWPs, a traditional AWPer's actual best strength is distance. You want to be as far away as possible. This guy's better when he's close up. If this guy's close range, like peak, think about when he's at the top of like Long on Dust 2, where he's around the bomb site, like peeking around those boxes. He's the guy who gets the 3 or 4 kills like that. He's not the guy who looks down long here and kills the guy jumping in the pit with like tracking headshot. That's Device. Like that's the classic AWPer. So to me, Brokey is not like a AWP you can build your team around. But if you can throw him in the mix like this and make him work with the rifle group, you can see it obviously works mega effective. So I'd say of the people who've won the major, he's probably in the middle of the AWPers, I would guess. Not anywhere near the top, but he's definitely better than the Fifth Larens of the world. Obviously, they were at their career worst when they won the major. Right, let's move on. Here's one for you. Oh, there's a couple that are about Richard. So, okay, this will be interesting. Right, BZ says, in honor of Richard Lewis, what would you say his greatest contribution of, it should be to Counter-Strike would be? What do you think his greatest contribution to CS was, Semler?
Well, I'm kind of conflicted because I want to say that he set the bar as a host.
Oh, I did. Like,
he really did set the bar as a host. Like all hosts that came after Richard, because Richard was still around, right? But all hosts that came after Richard had to still measure up to Richard. And I mean, if anything, like that's going to be it, because I mean, his journalism. Yeah, right. Obviously, his journalism. That's the thing. Is his journalism is excellent, and he's broken some big stories in the space. So, but as far as like in my sphere, in the talent side of things, I would say that, him being a host is just like one of the best hosts that we've had, period. And he set the bar early on as well. So I would have to go with that.
Yeah, the problem with this topic, obviously, is he did so many things and so well. Like
exactly
what Semler's talking about in terms of being a host, for example, the best way I would describe it is this. Before Richard became a host, hosts really were this. I'll give you an example. You know, when Shocks just did this event and everyone's praising all the prep she did and what a great job she did, you didn't have to do any of that as a host back in the day. The joke was a host back in the day was literally someone like Sir Scoots just taking from the headset, like, right, okay, finish with the break, right? And now, Thorin, what do you think about how Fnatic won that game? And then I just do the rest. Like, you just throw me the bit on at the beginning and I do all the rest. Now the host, if you notice, runs a proper show. They not only take headset confirmation, they then like, no, right, we're going to hit this topic first, then I'm going to bring Pimp in because he has a point on how the CT side of Nuke goes for Astralis, and then I'm going to bring Maui in for how they might put. Now it's like a full rundown show. And by the way, that all comes from the kind of shows Richard did on E-League. Like, I've told this story before. He didn't have a fucking teleprompter. He actually told them, just get rid of the teleprompter. I'm not going to use it. That was blowing their minds. I know fans don't get this. People who do real TV have less chops than people like Richard Lewis. They would, if you drop them, I've seen this happen, dude. It actually happened at the Champions League final. The Champions League final in soccer was a different TV network had bought the rights than normally does most of the football, right? And so everyone flamed the fuck out of them because what happened was the French police had this like battle with some of the fans and it delayed the show starting. And so during this time, classic esports moment, they needed to fill. And they had a real TV host with some of the most famous English football players of all time, Samler, and these guys were choking. These guys had nothing. They couldn't fill impromptu on topics they aren't talked about. The host, how do they know how much time's in their ear? Remember, to a normal human, that's terrifying. You don't know if you have 10 seconds before you have to throw or 10 minutes and you have to talk and extend for 10 minutes. People like Richard not only could handle that, you guys don't even know when they were doing it. I've heard in the headset, Phil, just no time limit, Phil. And then I've just seen he would just calmly turn. Earlier in the tournament, people were asking questions, though. Is FaZe going to eventually win the major? Though, thought it would just instantly segue. And on the joke is the reason why you guys were typing Cash to stop talking is because you don't. He was so good, you don't even know that was a fill. He just nailed it. So yeah, host is actually probably the most underrated aspect he did. People act like he did fuck all. He was mega. By the way, on E-League, I thought he was probably the best host we've ever had in CS.
I
just
so,
nailed
yeah.
it. He was at the peak.
He fucking knocked it out of the park, crushed it.
So I think Horst's a pretty good one because, yeah, maybe it's not noticed, but I do think he's the reason why we now have this level up and way better on that side. If I had to just throw something in there for the journalism, all I'll say is this. For me, I actually think the most important thing Richard did is best seen by like this Iron Curtain series he's doing now. It's when he would actually treat esports, a field that does not in any context deserve to be treated seriously as a real world like endeavor. He took this silly little video game owned by the most evil people in the world, played by the stupidest, most capricious people in the world, and supported by people who pay nothing and have nothing to say. And he treated it like it was a real domain that should be like respected, like we should actually like, talk about ethics. We should bring in, this is the thing he did similar for me, was bring the real world to esports. He decided we're not just going to talk about esports like it's just games. We're going to talk about the fact that you're fucking over a young person's livelihood when you ban their team in one way, but you don't apply the ban to another person from the same country. Essentially, like I say, he brought esports, this silly little side niche hobby, and treated it like it was a real world field that should actually be held to the highest standards. Because if people don't do that, we'll never be there. People aren't themselves going to force themselves to a higher standard. You have to make them come up to that standard. And so for me, that's what Richard did. He set the standard. He would come in and say, this level of professionalism must be met. And if it does not, I'm going to call people out. I'm going to call even the best players in the world and biggest money men out for this shit. So that's not a small feat. Very few people ever did anything like that. He did it way more than I did, put it that way. I just followed his suit. Here's another Richard one, actually. It says, Skarzord says, keeping the Richard Lewis themed questions, what is your favorite memory or story with Richard at an event from the past years of working it? So it's an event story. Give me an event story about Richard Lewis. Could be a public one, private one. Do you have one? A Richard Lewis story?
No, that I can repeat on stream?
Sadly, I blew that one from last week, didn't I? The EZPZ Liquid Squad. Yeah, that would be amazing. that would be I should have saved it if I'd have known. That would be mega. I know. I'm trying to think of another one now. Let me think.
Dude, no, I mean, like it's always just revolving around meeting up for drinks after the venues.
Could be an off the camera one. Yeah, sure.
It was just always, but that was always it. No, it was just like he would be at the bar and you would
always
be chilling with Richard at the bar after the event. At the end of the day, you go back to the bar, you have a cold one with Rich, and you shoot the shit and whatever topic it might be, that was going to be it. And so, like I remember him even going so far as like I can't remember which year it was, but DreamHack, you know how it's Elmia. We're in Bible Belt country of Sweden, right? Where everything closes early. There's no, there's not everything closes. There's no like parties that go later, any of that shit. And so DreamHacks, that was the issue with DreamHacks, is you didn't know how long you'd be at the studio. You could be done in 8 hours. You could be done in 15 hours. You had no fucking idea. But the problem is that bar closed at a certain hour, And I remember Richard once, that was the thing. It's like, he was the first, it was always like the first guy back to the bar. You better get some drinks for people. And he fucking showed up and he got a whole like rack of beer and like,
so you actually all end up getting a drink as a result, right?
He went back and he stocked up and he made sure that we were all looked after, like we had beers that night, because he fucking went back and got a whole case of them and all that sort of stuff, just to make sure, because we didn't know. Again, like shit, we show up an hour later after the bar's closed, that's it, you're shit out of luck. You're not having a drink at the end of the day. So yeah, Richard looked after us that way, and he was always bang on the money that way, man.
I've got a couple of stories for you. I've got two for you, and then we'll move on because we'll have to wrap.
I just got.
Here we go. There's one. People might actually know if they're old school enough this story, but I just think it just shows what type of person he was. The first ever Gfinity that I did in CSGO was the one that was in that Copper Box Arena in London. And if you remember, it was the one where Virtus Pro won over Titan in the final, if people remember this match, right? And at this tournament, this was the one where it was delayed. And so when the final was being played, they were kicking people out of the venue because it was past 10 p.m. And so literally they were taking the whole crowd seminar and coming and saying, like, you've got to leave now, like, you've got to go. As the finals all going on. So what Richard did was, even though it's not his event, and he wasn't even the host, but he was just an analyst like me. He just got up, he went over and he started talking to the security guys. He just basically found out, like, who's the main guy I talked to. And he just got to the security. He said to them, right, what is the issue? Why are people being removed? And he found out basically it's because the security guys have now finished their shift, like their time is finished. No one's going to pay them to stay longer. So logically, if you don't have security, you cannot, for like fire reasons, etc., you cannot have a crowd in a stadium without security, basically. So what Richard did for real was he said, right, let me go back to the organizers and tell me how much would it have to cost to pay overtime? Like, how much can we keep some guys? And basically, he went, even though it wasn't his event, he went back and forwards between these people. And by the way, this is the era when we were probably making like 600 euros for the whole event ourselves. We weren't on big day rates. This is like 2014. He went to the people and he managed to literally get Gfinity to agree to pay overtime and then get the security guys to agree to pay while they waited to see that they were going to. And eventually the crowd got to stay and finish the final. That is incredible. Like, again, as I'll stress one more time, he had nothing to do with this. He's just a guy on camera working. That's it. But he just went and fixed the whole problem for the fucking Gfinity people. And second one is this. It's quite a recent story. You might know the joke, but you don't know what happened afterwards. So here's the thing. At the major, I had what I thought was straight fire. I made a joke where when Virtus Pro had won a game, might have been against FaZe or something, because they're the guys who drag every game out, paid by the hour, all the jokes. Every game's 30 rounds. So I made, obviously the joke about VP is they are the hardest team to fucking beat in CSGO, aren't they? Because you can never put them away. So I said, these guys are harder to beat than a fucking Viagra addict. And then, like you do when you think of a joke on stage, I thought, if I can tag someone onto that, it's going to be funny. Yeah. So I go, Joe Biden. Even though, like, that actually doesn't really even work. Like, it sort of vaguely works, like he's old, maybe, like, but it doesn't really work. Like, it's not really a great joke. But this is the funny part. This is why it's my favorite memory, because the camera shot was on me as I'm saying the Joe Biden line, right? But I can see, because I'm always at the end of the desk and Richard's always at the other end, I can just look, and I'm just looking right at Richard. And the look on his face, I've seen this look many times on this show, on broadcast. It's a look that goes like this. On the one hand, begrudgingly, what I've said is funny, so a little bit of mirth, but then also a bit of trepidation, knowing that I might now have just caused an international incident. And then thirdly, that sort of vibe of like, why always when you're on my broadcasts? And there was sort of that baked in there, but at the same time laughing at it. So I just remember thinking like that. Essentially, that's the last moment I'll ever get to do that to Richard, just sort of like play with his emotions of his whole career in the show while he's just sat there right there like, oh, see that? See that? Nerve trigger. So that basically like that. So just one last edgy little ride for the boys. Exactly. There you go.
It was a ride.
Because basically the joke was all right, but the second I said Joe Biden, I can see
his whole face. He's just fucking like,
why have you done that? I know exactly. Like, why has he just literally said the name? Hasn't even masked it anyway. You haven't even said like the US president. You just said his name directly. There's no shading. There's no nuance. I know exactly. I know.
Not this US president, of course. I meant the last one.
Well, to be fair, maybe I would name the wrong Biden. I should have just said Biden.
There you
See
go.
what I did there? Anyway, we'll leave it at that. So, right, the next question. There's only 4 left here. Oh, there's 5. Here we go. Here's one for you. Oh, this is going to be a tough one. Archives of Justinian says, what is the biggest upset during a playoff series that you called correctly going into it?
Oh, fuck.
Do you ever have one? Do you ever have like a crazy call you made where an upset happened and you for real said it? Obviously, the spoiler here is the fucking Thanos of this is Anders because he just picks every fucking upset, doesn't he?
Yeah,
so that doesn't get the count, Anders. You don't get that, mate. You don't.
No,
get
I'm
that.
not. I'm not going to be able to.
You ever have one you?
I don't.
The best one's the one where it's like you just feel like this team will do it, even if everything else says otherwise. You know.
Fuck. The thing is like I can remember, but I can't remember the details. No, I don't have. Like I can't remember. That's too.
It's going to be a tough one for sure.
That's a tough one. I can't remember off the top of my head anything like that.
Let me think. What would that be?
Because we don't keep track of the predictions.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like that's the issue is that it all just becomes a blur, you know, because then you're not really paying attention to predictions. You're just kind of like throwing them out there and like, hey, you know, it works out. I mean, obviously, I've had a few good runs at Blast, you know, where we were keeping score because we finally convinced them to keep score, you know, so that it would actually be a running thing, a running tally throughout the event. They were the only ones to do it at first. Still aren't they? I don't know if they're still doing it or not, but yeah, no, that's. Oh. No, not off the top of my head. Sorry to disappoint.
The problem with that question, it's actually a good question. It's just the downside is because you've said biggest, it's really hard to think. If you just said random upset, maybe I could pick one, but like the biggest is what makes it hard. Because how many times have I ever called one of the biggest upsets of all time? Like it will have happened, but it's hard to remember, unfortunately. I'm trying to think what squads it even could be that I might have picked. Because I know I used to pick a lot of like Dignitas ones. Let me think, who could I have picked for these ones? Did I ever pick G2 to beat? No, I don't think we can do this one. We'll skip. Anyway, here's the thing. Maybe we'll return to that in a future week or something.
Too
like,
fucking.
But Pounder 420,
hey.
popular, says, okay, someone might not be able to do this, but we'll see. You are creating an NBA team from scratch. You have the first overall pick and can pick any player from history. Who would you pick? Oh, you can do it. It's historical. Essentially, if you had to start an NBA team, you could pick any player in history. Who would your number one pick be? Who would you take? Because he's sort of shaded in, you'll notice. It's like you're not necessarily only picking the best. You're also sort of trying to figure out, like, for a squad, who would you want and who would you start your team with and all that jazz, you know?
Yeah. I mean, just for the Bants, I think you'd have to go with like Barkley, you know?
That's a pretty good one, sure.
You know, because not only is he going to kill it on the court, but
the market would be great. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. The locker room, he's going to be funny as fuck too. So I'd probably go with Barkley and just kick it off from there because I've always liked his attitude. He's fucking killing it on.
He's also a mega player as well. Yeah, sure.
Dude, he's rad. Got to meet him at a bar once in Atlanta. He just randomly walked in at the bar that was by the place that we were staying. So that was cool as well. So yeah, probably go.
Here's the funny thing. I don't know if I don't actually know if this guy is obviously like a patron of mine as well. I don't know actually like what he was thinking with this question though, because I get the vibe that since he did like the building a team
full 5-man roster, like, or does he just want the one player?
No, he just wants the first player basically. It's the idea it's from scratch. Because here's the thing. I actually think, even though a lot of fans would just do what they would do, basically, same as in CSGO, if you ask the same question, they go simple. So they'd say Michael Jordan, right? It's the obvious one you'd go with. But here's the reason why I actually want to pick Michael Jordan, because he's just said that I'm making the team from scratch. And here's the thing people might not know about Michael Jordan's career. I'll one day do a video about this on my side channel. I actually think if Michael Jordan didn't get Phil Jackson as his coach, I don't think he ever would have won an NBA championship. Because if you don't know, he was a very selfish player. And he was a player, much like a Nico, where because he was so good, it's like life never taught him he was wrong. He always just thought he was right. And so if you don't know, some of the players Michael Jordan, before he got his championship teams, asked to be traded to his team. They were shocking, mate. This guy was a guy, he would have done a Stewie 2K. He would have made a dog shit squad, like of people who were friends or like they were good like 3 years ago. He had some really dodgy tastes. So the difference is, I actually think, to me, the two answers for this, there's two people I would choose between. You can take whichever one you want. In my opinion, it's either Magic Johnson or Larry Bird. And the reason why is this, and I'm going to take Larry Bird personally. The reason why is this, those are two players who basically are your best player, but also run the whole team. Like Magic Johnson's probably the best passer in the NBA history. Larry Bird's also very good at that. The reason I would take Larry Bird is this, because he not only had an all-round game, he was also an amazing clutch player. Like this guy's going to shoot the last shot and win me. So he can do so many things in my team. If I have that as my first piece, mate, I can make loads of different choices and make a great team. So I'll take Larry Bird. Bit of an unorthodox pick, but
no, I like it. It's that's the problem is time. It's just out of time. But like I watched The Last Dance again recently, there's quite a bit of, just talking about Larry Bird.
Sure.
And that is, it's great to get that kind of insight, because if you weren't watching the games back then actively, it's kind of hard to go back and like figure out like where you should even start to be able to
For sure.
try and put the pieces together. So when you have documentary series like that come out, they kind of give you at least a little bit of a window in. It's pretty cool. So yeah, Larry Bird definitely.
Right, we've only got 3 more, so let's get through them. Here's one. Henoda says, can Nico make it work with a top-tier IGL before the end of his individual prime? You think it'll ever happen for him?
With a top tier, I mean, I think we've established this already. If it doesn't happen with Alex, I don't think it happens at all.
I mean, eventually the window is going to close, right? Like, here's the thing. I'll give Nico this credit. Like Simple, he does just seem to defy all the laws of like you should age and eventually not get that good at the game and drop off. He does seem to somehow just keep being amazing every year. But even so, everyone has a window. Eventually there'll be a period when Nico's just a good player. He's not like a supernova, like transcendable. And when he's that player, by the way, he better have already won with the good IGL, because at that point he won't be able to call all his shots, will he? Like, he's not going to be the God Emperor at that point, is he?
But do you think he's already there? Like, I feel like I'm worried about him already being at the threshold of that period of time where he's going to start, not because I think it's not going to be like overnight with him. He's so good, raw skill, that it's going to take time, but he may already be on that downward.
I think that's why this
started so high. He's still. That's
why I think this whole scenario is a bit too dirty, though, Semler. Because really, what we're all assuming basically is that we're assuming, right? Well, if Nico's not playing well, it must be like the IGL and the team. It's like, for all we know, maybe Nico's just in a slump. Could be that too, right?
It could 100% be it as well.
Absolutely.
He's also getting older as well. Like, which is, it's just, he's by no means old yet, not by CS standards, but like he is getting older. So it could be a question of, like, does he have a girlfriend? Is there, like, are there other?
That's even an area he doesn't get credit for, by the way. One area Nico doesn't get credit for is look how many years he kept himself in amazing playing shape. Like this guy, if people win championships, often they have a year or two, then they go off the boil. They stop fucking giving a shit. They get the money and just phone it in. Here's the one thing I'll say about Nico. I don't think he's ever phoned it in. He always looked like he put in the fucking hours and turned in the server and tried to frag out. Like, you got to give him that. His longevity has been very impressive.
Yeah.
I have to say, this is actually a tougher question than you think, because the key thing is how many more years does he get of his prime? Even if you give him 2 years, that might only be like 1 or 2 more IGLs. So I have to say, at the moment, it sort of looks like I'm maybe more on the no side. Maybe he doesn't get it together. I hope he does. That's why the scenario I'm in is a really tough one. Like, as fucked up as it sounds, the reason why I also low-key wouldn't mind if Nico left G2 now is because the reason I want G2 to succeed is because Carlos is a friend of mine, so I actually care about that team succeeding. But if Nico really is just the fucking spoiled kid making all these demands, then I actually want him to just fail on his own and fuck off. Like, just take your lumps for what you do. There's only 2 more, then we're finished.
Yeah.
Tea Time says, Valve comes to you and tells you that Source 2 is going to be released after the next major. Might even be true. And this time, they're scared about Valorant esports destroying the injured golden goose of CS esports. They come to you to recreate the scene in ways that you feel are realistic. How would you do it as people inside Valve? So basically, if you had Valve's power, what would you do to make it so that like Valorant can't overtake CS or sort of take its shine? Because obviously, we might have the Source 2 engine coming soon, right? Do you have any ideas what you'd like to do on a Valve end?
Exactly what Valve are doing right now, which is to make sure at whatever cost you do not fuck up the transition from Source to Source 2, and you maintain the skin market, because that's the golden goose that's keeping everything running. The whole ecosystem of the game. If there is a way into China, it is through that as well, because that's where a lot of the money is coming from.
No doubt.
The skin market is the Chinese guys, and they like to show off. They start having that kind of money, that kind of flex, and then all of a sudden more people maybe get interested in China more so than ever. So Valve, I think right now, are being very shrewd in that they're not rushing things. They're really taking their time, making sure that what makes CSGO a compelling game, not only is it a great game, but it also has great skins and has a great skin market and has a great opportunity for artists to make money. So there's always going to be interest there. Like, I think that they're being very shrewd about it, and they're approaching it the way that they should. And in that, just don't fuck up the skins. Like, just make sure that whatever you do, you're still going to have the skins and you're still going to have the skin market, because then you'll still have a game. There's still a reason for Valve to be interested in the game. If the skin market, for whatever reason, takes a hit tomorrow, that's what's making money for Valve, and that's what's keeping those guys interested. Valve are extremely ruthless when it comes to opportunity cost. If a developer at Valve could be better, could be spending his time doing something else that's more lucrative, then all of the pressure at the company is pushing him towards that other thing, which is why esports guys at Valve really take a lot of flack from the other employees at Valve, because the other employees are just like, why aren't you working on this AI, or why aren't you working on this other shit, or whatever, this other stuff that's going to make us billions of dollars, when, you're only making a couple $100 million over here. Like, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but like, that's the way that they think about it. When it comes to esports, for them, it's just like a loss, that you could be better spent, fine tuning the Steam marketplace or figuring something else out to do with your time. And so right now, like the CS guys, in order for us to continue having CS, they need to make sure that they keep CS profitable and keep it printing money, because otherwise Valve will also, it'll turn into Team Fortress. They won't care. They'll just be like, oh yeah, okay, fine. No, that was cool while it lasted. It's not making money anymore. Okay, fine, fuck it. And there won't be any more majors, and there won't be anything else. It'll just fade into nothing, and we'll be just left with our dick in our hands and ESL running the show. So that's my perspective, at least. I think that we just need to make sure that we continue to have a game, and then we can go from there. Right.
You're not going to like this. None of you are going to like this. But here's what I'd do if I were Valve. First thing I would do is this is why you're not going to like it, because it actually probably would have the end result of the opposite of what he said, which is make CS more popular, make it better. I'd make the game harder. I'd actually take it back to its roots a bit. Like, for example, I would make one thing I would love to remove that I thought was one of the biggest abominations ever when they put it in CS, was because they were trying to combat bunny hopping, which is quite niche anyway, they made it so that just like in CS, when you hit the ground, you sort of like, your inertia slows down a bit. Yeah, I'd remove that. Like, I think essentially, if you can, because here's the thing, people wouldn't be bunny hopping all the time, but people sometimes would use like a skill jump to do like a jump over long air or something like that, right? And the reason why that's good is because think about all the complaints you get now about how dominant the AWP is. The more I can dodge, the less the AWP hits me. If I can jump around a corner like that with two people, the AWP's not going to hit every person. That's going to be really hard to hit like a flick shot like that. So like anything that essentially raises the skill ceiling a little bit, I think just makes CS, because like I said at the beginning of the episode, that's what CS is about. It's a hardcore game. So to me, I want it to be a lot of skill expression. I want it to be like what I'd love is this, because it already sort of low-key happens among the people who come from CSGO assembler. If someone is the best in Valorant, they will point out like, but you can't quite carry the same way you can in CSGO. That's the point. That's what you want CSGO's vibe to be. That it's like the highest skill level. It's the Chad game, You want it to be game. Like, yeah, exactly. Let this be the little kids game, the Babby's version of CSGO for Valorant. That's the vibe you want in the market.
It's the same thing with League and Dota. It's just like, if you figure out the Dota's there, you should be playing Dota. You should.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's the same thing.
Right, one last question, and then we're done. We'll obviously ask questions for next week if you want, and they might even be answered live. We'll see. Right, the last question is IDW, please fuck my girlfriend, GF, which just means I will dominate. It's a guy I do a show with from League of Legends. It says, when was the CSGO meta at its best? So what's your take? When was your favorite CSGO meta? What would you pick?
Man, off the top of my head, for whatever reason, I guess I'm just kind of like stuck back then, because it just annihilated both of those players at the same time. But like Kenny and JW peak opping was so explosive.
Oh, the pre-op nerf was legit, wasn't it? Yeah.
Pre-op nerf, like those guys, what they could do, just take over and like rule with an iron fist. Like players, I mean, now obviously there's players like that, excuse me, simple, whatever. But like peak Kenny S, everybody was scared. Like everybody was afraid of him. Nobody, like you could just see how his opponents played differently if he was on the server. And it was really obvious back then. So if I had to have like a favorite meta, it was pre-op nerf, just like right at that moment, peak their powers. JW and Kenny were just so entertaining to watch. They were so aggressive. Great. It was really like they got to express themselves, because as soon as that op nerf happened, man, it just tanked them. That was it. It was so tragic. And I think that kind of leans into what you were talking about as well, in terms of like the mobility of being able to be quick and
try was against the nerf.
Yeah, it was such a shame that they felt like they had to go that. And again, that is like lowering the skill ceiling. It's just making it so that it's, instead of having these highs, these extremes of what these guys are capable of, we're just going to go ahead and artificially bring that down so that everybody's,
sure,
you can all be mediocre together. And yeah, I don't like decisions like that at all. If personally, and again, like rolling, if we wanted to raise skill ceiling or whatever, like I might roll it back to a pre economy change as well, and just bring it back to cutthroat, hard resets, get fucked, You could have more one-sided games, but also it was so intense because you'd have these rounds. And as a commentator, I guess it's being selfish a bit as a commentator as well, because we could build up the story around those rounds really well. You know, you could build the tension in the cast because you knew, okay, they have to hard eco now, but this is the gamble that they're taking. And you could just build it up and like, okay, and now we're going to get into this round. And now let's see, like, what does Pronax have up his sleeve? Blah, blah, blah. Right. You could really build up these sick narratives in the game and kind of give you that ebb and flow. And now it just feels very deflating when it's like, oh shit, that's a big deal. They won this round. Oh, awesome. And then the next round, you just already see the team that lost the round just buying fucking rifles. And you're just like, how do they have the money for that? You know? So that is still one thing that kind of just takes away a little bit of that hype for me. Even to this day, it's still just one of those things that still irks me. Just the economy.
Here's the thing. I actually also thought the same thing because obviously famously I was never a big fan of the opener. For people who don't know, when me and Semler did an episode of Snipe, it's on like YouTube somewhere. Someone actually made a video of that like 20-minute argument, me, you, Pimp, and Lerpasad were out. It was like me versus you three guys, like, no, the ARP is still the best or whatever. We had that whole like debate about it. But anyway, the problem is though, the reason I wouldn't pick that era overall, because I agree for the ARP, it was mega. The downside is this, Semler. That was also the exact period when both the CZ and the Tekken were broken. Like that I did not like. I fucking hated that. Yeah. Because obviously I love tactical Counter-Strike and those guns by definition destroy tactical Counter-Strike. So the problem is I'm actually going to pick a boring answer because I actually think when I think of all the years of CS, I'm going to pick 2016. Now you're going to think, I can't even remember what the meta was. That's why. It's the only time period ever I can think of when there's nothing busted in the meta. Like the rifles are fairly balanced, the pistols are fairly balanced, the map pool's fairly good. It's just basically when it's like, right, leave it, Valve, leave it. But then they have to go, can I just take out this good map and put in new? No, don't do that. Don't stop doing that. Like, it's the problem with Valve. Valve software nerfs and buffs things like a cat looking at you, knowing that it's not allowed to knock this glass off. You go, hey, stop that. They go, you go like this, do you? No. You're like, oh, why did you wait 10 seconds to knock it? Because they have to fuck with you. So that's what Valve is. That's the cat knocking it off at the end. Like, this is the one time where I held its arm. Stop knocking it. There you go.
That's the perfect.
There's the analogy for you. Cut on that.
That's the perfect show. All right.
Chris is still into the picture. Oh, still very much in the round. Oh, Chris, he's found 3. It's down to a 2-on-2. Chris, can he close this with an ace? Oh my God!
He gives him a chance at least, and this CZ kill could be everything. Finally, Zeus, he does something.
Looking for a second, he connects in. Oh, and he gets a third as well. Surely he's not going to pull